Let's start off with something a bit more casual. Firstly, so you left me a lovely message explaining a few things from my last interview. How did you find that video? Have you been aware of my channel for a while?
No, actually. So that one was sent to me by one of the Discord users on my Discord server, and they were like, "Look, someone's mentioned you. They also wanted to chat to you," which was they were talking about the Vitriol dev. So I watched it through, and that was the first time I come across your channel as well. And then I just watched a few videos because I actually noticed that there was a lot that you were saying that really is it's so much the stuff that I've been trying to say as well. And I have a somewhat complex way of saying things, and you kind of simplified a few things as well. And so it really resonated with me, is that the things that you were saying. I've watched a few videos of yours, quite a few of them now, including your stream where you were playing Boneworks again for probably the second time. Um, so yeah, there's definitely things that I was like looking at, I was mentioning to myself while watching your videos. I was like, yeah, exactly that, you know. So yeah, that's how I came across you anyway. So unfortunately, I never heard of you before, but I absolutely would have subscribed regardless because you really are saying the things that I've been thinking in many ways.
Well, coming from yourself and someone of your popularity, that really is a great honor, especially someone with your technical know-how. And actually, I have mentioned you a few times in various content when talking about physics, especially, and I want to give you a chance before anything else, as I like to think of myself as quite a straight shooting person. A lot of my mentions of you, I have put the the accusation that you are, from my sense and feeling about you, that I really admire what you're doing. But my feeling was that you are the type of dev who would tend to get so absorbed and lost in their work upon and doing iteration upon iteration that it would leave one, a normie like me, doubtful that there would be any output from you. And I've said this a few times, and I will say it to your hypothetical face or your virtual face. And I want to give you a chance to tell me how correct or wrong or somewhere in the middle I am with that observation of you. Are you that kind of dev?
You are sort of halfway with that. So it's a bit life story like going on here when it comes to that. I effectively didn't really know. I mean, on the one hand, I was aware in terms of my innovation ideas and stuff that I was going to do some pretty cool stuff with the tech, and I always wanted to. Ever since I started playing games, I was like, ooh, you know what? I want to be able to. I want virtual reality, basically. But I recognized over the past few years, maybe after joining Ubisoft, which was around 2020, and we'll talk about that, of course, um, that I'm gonna have that problem. That's a problem that I'm going to have. It's something that I've learned just through family. It's kind of an inherent nature to me is to become sort of stuck in the game and just be there for forever and just keep developing and keep increasing and improving the systems and never go anywhere with it. I did start pushing out demos on purpose to kind of push myself a little bit, but it is something that I fight. It's something that I have to fight. Is this want to continually, perpetually just keep going and never put out anything out there. But for now, and that's why I wanted to have this kind of chat where I can kind of explain that, which is you're correct, but over the past few years, I've kind of been forcefully developing myself to change that mindset.
Hmm.
And right now, I'm already, well, I say already, but I'm speaking to investors and stuff like that in regards to the first game, which is Project EX, that I want to put out as a proper game. And I have so many plans for what more I want to do with obviously with the systems that I build. outside of just making games, in fact. So I have plenty to talk about on that front. Really, what I kind of wanted from VR was never just gaming. I started, of course, as a game dev because I played Mario. Other hand, there we go. Leap motion's getting confused. I played Mario back when I was 4 years old, and I was like, well, I want to make these. That's it. That was when I wanted to be a game developer, and that has now matured into once I started fiddling with VR, or at least conceptually before I even had access to the tech, that changed to my goodness, there's so much more I want to do here. I'll give you a little bit of storyline to this. Back in the days when I had Mario 64, so obviously that released 96. So probably around 2000, maybe just before 2000, I was probably playing Mario 64. And I used to play that game in a way that wasn't really the main game. I would have Mario walk around the world, right? I think I've crawled most of Mario 64 as well, like as Mario. Um, but yeah, I would have him walk around the world because I basically experienced that world as a world instead of a game, which is so it's such a different way of doing things. There's actually a YouTuber I've been watching quite recently called Any Austin, who does a bunch of videos where he just goes into a discussion about the worlds of the games, not the games as they are meant to be played. And that's how I view VR. That's what I wanted from VR from the very beginning. If you look at the channel, you'll see the first video I did of VR many years ago was actually just immediately into locomotion. In fact, it's funny because by then no one was even calling it locomotion in VR. So I just kind of called it movement system or something like that, Oculus movement system. And that's because I just wanted to be able to feel the virtual world. I wanted to walk through it naturally, and it felt great because I was not playing it as a game. So that's kind of where I ended up was developing systems for the overall experience to bring the real human entirely into VR. And that's why I ended up obviously with physics based as well, which is yeah, I mean this could just keep going on forever. I can keep describing more and more about how I got there. But yeah, that's why it feels like that, where I'm just perpetually making something more and more and more in depth in VR, and it's never getting to a point of a game. Right now I have a proper plan. So again, I was kind of forced to do this by myself and by the way that the investment structure works as well. I kind of forced myself to put together a proper document to describe a game as it's supposed to be, and one that is now in investors' hands, documents and stuff like that that they can actually read and see a possible future, a possible game that I can make out of this. Which, of course, I kind of work towards in terms of what I'm developing as well right now. My intent right now is to get a demo out to everyone as quick as possible.
How long is as quick as possible?
It's been ongoing for years, but
Hmm.
no, right now it's literally at a stage where I can put it out, it'll work as a demo. So within the next few months, I just want it out. Right now we're going through a bit of a house move. So past few months have been completely I've been completely absent, even on my YouTube channel where I used to upload almost every week, back in the past few years. But the past 2 years or so have been kind of a completely relaxed world, as I've just had to step away from making videos mainly and just focusing on a bunch of things just to get everything sorted in life.
Mm.
But once this move has gone through, everything's kind of a little bit more stable, everything's settled, and yeah, things change back to how they were. And now with a proper understanding of what I need to do to actually get into the industry properly, as opposed to just being in jobs in the industry at all times, which is where I currently am.
It's really hard to be your own boss. It's really hard to organize yourself in so many different disciplines to be effective, because essentially you're sort of being PR, you're being marketing, you're also the talent, you're doing all the coding, and I think that there's a reason why we generally, prior to today's age, we worked better, and I still think we do. We work better in teams. In regards to chaps like yourself who are doing seemingly very exciting and revolutionary things with VR, and I think that's where, and you seem intelligent enough to understand that users and consumers like myself who are really into VR will look at your content, will get excited about what you're doing, but also simultaneously be frustrated at the lack of output over the years. I think that you can understand why that would be the case. But chaps like yourself who are exceptional and are very talented. I'm going to be very direct with you, and you can call me out and tell me if I'm being rude or not. That talent comes with a consequence, I think. You say that you've had to force yourself to start doing all these things, to organize and get in touch with investors and get an output. And I think I personally feel from my life experience that devs like yourself, you have this extreme focus and talent, but that causes you to be lackluster and weak in organizing yourself in other areas. And this is where I think, as much as it may be a bit frustrating for you, extremely talented folks like you would thrive when you have someone overseeing you and kicking you up the arse a bit to make sure that you don't get lost in your own little cycles, as you mentioned, that you do. Would you agree with that observation, or do you think I'm being a bit too harsh there?
To a certain extent. Sorry, if you see my hand floating up here, this is where my
I thought you
microphone.
were trying to give me the finger. It's okay.
No, no. This is
It's okay.
my. Luckily, I only have three fingers on this
You do
kind of.
have a middle finger, though. Three is enough to have a middle
Yeah,
finger. Yeah.
that's the problem. You're correct. I would say almost entirely, with the exception of one little bit. At least for me personally, I can't speak entirely for other people. Um, I was lucky enough to have kind of pulled myself out of that box in its entirety, where I would be entirely that way inclined. So I'd like to say that I'm kind of a little bit unusual in that area where I have that aspect of me, and I'm very focused in this one kind of area. I'm very much stuck to it in many ways, but at the same time, I have a lot of other things going on which kind of forced me to think a little bit differently. So, for example, I kind of go heavily into, I shouldn't mention this entirely, but I kind of go heavily into current events and things like that around the world. And I have a bit of an opinion on everything. Excuse my phone there. But yeah, I have a bit of an opinion on literally everything. It actually feeds quite heavily into my work, which is it's quite cool. Is that when you have an interest in everything, you end up with a tiny bit, even if it's a small bit, you get a tiny little bit of knowledge in every area, which allows you to put things together a little bit better. So it's a little easier for me to innovate that way by looking at everything around me. But yeah, so there is that element where ordinarily, if I was, oh, it's weird to say this because it sounds almost offensive, but if I was the normal form of what I am, then I would probably do best with a boss.
The normal
But
form of what you are. What does
yeah,
that
what
mean?
what what you're describing, if I was 100% that,
Oh,
then I would probably do better with a boss, with someone who's effectively kind of directing. Um, but I'm a little bit unusual in that area as well. I'm a little bit more uh aggressive in what I want.
so
So
you're
I
not
probably
agreeable.
fire them immediately.
You're not agreeable, and you don't work. I see. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. That's the unusual part. I'm also completely not agreeable, which a lot of people around me would probably agree to that. Like I question. I told my manager this when I was working in the previous job. which was Ubisoft, which was I question literally everything, and I mean literally everything, and he's
Hmm.
very aware of it. He was anyway.
I'm kind of surprised to hear that, to be honest, because your demeanour seems very amicable and agreeable. But perhaps it's the voice and the tonality which is fooling me.
To a certain extent.
Hmm.
So I'm
I can
part
hear
of
that. I can
learning
hear
the
the
world.
slight smile, the cheeky smile in your voice as well.
Oh, if there was a webcam, you'd see that I'm smiling more than the character.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so to a certain extent, it's not really it's not it's not that I'm camouflaged under a pleasant voice or a pleasant way of speaking or anything like that. I just kind of forced myself to learn how to speak as well. I like to say this to the people who kind of know me, which is that I was the quietest person you ever knew, right? And you could ask my mother this, right? She would tell you, in the early years, I'm the quietest person you ever knew because I was kind of the weirdo, right? I'm a little bit overly focused on certain things, mainly on the digital world, and I'm a little bit crazy in that world, right? But at the same time, I was seeing things where I kind of knew there was a solution to things, and I mentioned the solution, and nobody listened, right? And I was like, "Oh, you could just do it this way," and no one listened. And in the end, I kind of forced myself to be loud. So I'm both a very quiet person and incredibly loud. But yeah, I forced myself to be vocally aggressive where necessary. So, like I said earlier, I'm kind of lucky in that aspect where I've kind of got a bit of both, and I can choose which one to be at any moment.
Mm, mm. Well, one thing that you learn when being a part of a team dynamic or even a content creator is that it isn't about what you say. Most of the time, it's about how you say it. You can be as correct as anyone could ever be, but if you say it in a manner that's emotionally disagreeable or just doesn't resonate, then it will always fall, or nearly always fall, on deaf ears. We humans like to think that we're far more rational and reasonable and logical than we actually are, but we are in reality far more highly emotionally driven and resonant than I think we would ever like to admit, even consciously. So yeah, I've also encountered that where people just will not listen to you, or even with some of my videos, and irrespective of the message that I'm giving and whether I get a negative comment that says that effectively is agreeing with me, but they just don't like how I said it because I sound posh or because my voice is a bit sort of deep and maybe a bit aggressive in a way, and yeah, it matters very, very much. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's a
yeah.
form of marketing. You have to be honest, I think your voice is the perfect one for what you're doing
Well,
because it's got that element of Britishness. So you've got the stiff upper lip element, while simultaneously you're very clear on what you want to say. So it's actually very nice to listen to as well. It's very clear, it's very forward in the statements that you make as well. So there's going to be a lot of people especially in the modern world, that are going to struggle with anything being said that they might not agree with, or even anything being said in a way that they don't like to hear it. And that's just the inherent nature of the modern world now being very internet heavy, where so much interfacing has been done sort of like this, where there isn't really a human face involved.
mm,
So people aren't always needing to control their faces and learn how to do that and control the words that they use, or at least the tone that they use, because very often it's in text form. And even worse, it's in short form text form. Like, for example, Twitter. Not that I've ever called it anything but Twitter. I've never called it X in my life. Um, yeah, so even that makes it even worse, where you've got this kind of short messaging service, SMS style text format limitation, and people are trying to explain things in basically the most obnoxious form of slang just out of necessity. It's the limitation of the system. Uh, it does become a learning process. You kind of learn how to become that. And
Not
if you're
even
not
just, I'm sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to add to
yeah,
you, not
sorry.
even just a necessity, I think it's performative as well. I think that internet communication greatly encourages performative forms of speech where people are trying to one up each other by being more funny, sharing memes and stuff, and showing that they are the most charismatic one, which causes even more dilution and warping of the communication.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, there's always the element of each thing that's being said, again, because it's short form, needs to needs
Stand
to be an
out.
impressive statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to hit hard every little bit. And you can't, how can you have an atmospheric book that is trying to describe a whole story of things happening where every single line is impactful? You can't. You can't have every single line be a hard hitting, heartfelt truth that makes the person reading cry in every single line. You have to have a whole structure, a whole paragraph before you can invoke an emotion. And unfortunately, the internet does not encourage that.
Well, I think part of the problem there is that we can say, and I can agree with you, that we need a full structure, we need a full paragraph, we need nuance, we need some context, we need the words to fill some certain emotional abstract gaps as well as give the direct information because we're more than just direct beings. But I think the problem that we're going to be facing more and more is when you say things like that, I can sit here and nod my head and agree with you because I have lived in a reality that understands and emphasizes and shows me the benefits of that. But the future generations will hear what you're saying, or even the generations now, and will hear you say this, but they have no point of reference. You can say you need a paragraph, but they haven't, but it's hard to say why. It isn't being demonstrated to them in society, in daily life, why this is a good thing, why it's, yeah. So I think that we're going to be facing, I think that society and our communication is going to go through some very serious problems in the decades to come if things don't change dramatically. But we will see. I think that our communication standard and ability to understand each other is going to degrade dramatically if the internet continues to proliferate at the rate it is and how the communication is going.
I'm unfortunately inclined to agree. It's a problem. Having any discussion anywhere now kind of devolves into almost an internet feel to it, even in the real world.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get on to a bit more of yourself and the physics, unless there was something else that you wanted to talk about or mention particularly.
Not really. I mean, uh, we just had a discussion that was nothing to do with gaming,
Yeah.
so yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I
I
hope to
can go
do.
on for 7 hours if I need
Yeah.
to.
That's exactly what I hope to do with these chats. Again, I don't have any questions prepped. I'm trying to go more for the sort of go with the flow, Joe Rogan esque, just speak with the person, and so on. I think that's just so much better than asking formal questions. Normal interviews tend to be really stilted and artificial and just not nice to listen to. But yeah, physics. You are a talented programmer guy, and how did you get your skills? How did you get good?
Let's jump to another world while we discuss. And I love showing off. He
Yeah.
asked me about my skills, so I show off.
Traveling to another, yeah, that is very fancy. Like, again, you built all of that, yes? You coded all of that, correct?
Yes.
It's just
Yes. So this
wizardry
is
to me, man. It's beyond my comprehension in any way. Like, I look at that, I see the graphics, I see the fidelity of the graphics, I see the cohesion of the art that you've used, I see the animation that you've done, I don't know if there's any sound effects, I can see the shadow of the pine tree there, and I'm thinking, how did you code all that? How does it even begin to work? And there's a part of me that's so interested and wants to know every little detail, but also knows that that would be a very, that wouldn't be a good thing to do. But how did you begin to get these skills to do these incredibly impressive things, Mr. Nimso?
It's an unusual one, this one. So I can give you a little jump into an actual different. Um, there was another live stream that I was a bit of a guest on, where we were talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, because I did a little bit. Um, I made a video when Sonic Frontiers, which was the latest Sonic game, came out, and I wasn't so happy about how it was built. And I was talking a little bit about the trailer and just from a game dev perspective. We had a live stream, and they'd asked me effectively the question about how did I get into game dev as well. They also had another game dev on at the same time, and that game dev described how she'd got into game dev the most sort of standard way, which is, you have your education elements, and then you try and get maybe an apprenticeship or something, and then you get into um, you get into a job, and then you kind of build up as you go. And for me, it almost immediately you could hear the difference, that it was just a different process, and both of these processes are something that you can kind of use. One is the standard method like that, and the other for me was, as I mentioned earlier, it was by the age of 4 where I started playing Mario games. We had a Super Nintendo at the time, and my dad still has a Nintendo, like a classic NES, in the loft as well. And immediately I looked at this stuff and I was like, I want to make these. And I want to be able to make a Mario game, for example, right? So by the age of 8, my dad had already taught me, kind of on the same day, he kind of showcased to me a bunch of applications, which were Macromedia Flash. Yeah, it was Macromedia then. I just automatically said Macromedia.
Mm.
Macromedia Flash, Dreamweaver, and Photoshop. My dad kind of taught me each of these things. So I basically got into graphic design that moment, right? Web dev didn't seem to interest me so much, but Flash was animation, and it was a tiny bit of code. It was like the most minuscule amount of code at the time. This was Flash 4 before ActionScript was even invented. And yeah, so I kind of became graphic design and animation heavy there and then. And almost over the next 2 years, I was lucky enough to have access to the internet, right? 56K, you've got your 4K per second, doo 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 doo, that sound, and everyone remembers it, who was there at the time. And I was lucky enough to try and get into programming via that. So I just kind of learned it all by myself,
How?
thanks to
How?
text tutorials.
Ah,
Well,
text tutorials.
I,
Okay.
yeah, I actually found the website that my first Hello World Java web page that I'd followed, the tutorial that I'd followed. I found it on the web just by forcing Google to search from a time range. And that tutorial was posted in 1996, revised in 1999. So yeah, I found the same page on the internet, and I can literally find it right now as well. It was a Java tutorial. So I got in with that. That was the first thing. So first thing I learned was, how do I program? And I kind of just Google searched a little bit, found out that you need an IDE, which is the application that'll let you compile and run your code.
IDE
And
means Integrated Development Environment, correct?
yes, so it gives you a full package. You write your code in there. You can then debug it. You can run it. It's a whole package to run things. It's a bit like Unity, but without the game elements. Right? It's for those that aren't looking into it. For everybody else, you're going to be laughing at what I just said, right? So anyone who knows what it is. So I learned that you have to use one of those. So I got one of those, and then I found that tutorial, and I copied the tiny little "Hello World" bit of code, and it worked. So from then on, I was like, okay, that's it. I know how to do this. I can do this. That's it. No matter how difficult it is, I'm going to do it because I want to become this.
Huh.
I was probably about 10 at the time. By the time I got to university, I already wanted to get into the industry at that point. So it was all kind of Android development at the time for me. I was doing a bit of mobile games. They still exist, but they were taken off the store because I never updated them since. And you kind of have to update them with certificates and stuff now. So my apps don't exist on the store right now, although I can re-upload them if I wanted to, but I don't have the original source files. But yeah, at that point, I started doing some YouTube videos because I suddenly, so weirdly enough, I kind of became what the modern child is nowadays, who sees a YouTube video, which is, I want to be PewDiePie, right? I became that for a moment, and I kind of forgot about everything that I wanted to be for a little while, for a very short while. Once I finally started making YouTube videos, just at the end of university, and all of my YouTube videos were then talking about game development, right? It was showcasing the little projects that I was making, and it was talking about them. And very, very soon, because this was the time when the DK1 started to appear, and obviously I was watching YouTube channels, right? I was watching YouTubers, and they started having access to the DK1. And I was like, there it is. There's the thing that I wanted my whole life, right? I wanted to experience these worlds. It's right there. That's the tech. It costs 400 quid. I need one of those.
Hmm.
So as soon as I had a job, the first thing that I purchased was a DK2, because by then it was a DK2. And yeah, I I posted YouTube videos about what I was doing. So the first thing I was doing obviously was about locomotion. From there, I just kept talking about VR, and I was pushing these ideas, this, that, and the other. I didn't know whether it was good, whether it was bad, I don't know. And eventually, while I'm just in call center jobs at the time, I
Oh
got
man,
a
my heart
message
goes out to
from,
you. Oh, call centers.
yeah.
Where you want to dial her?
But I can actually say something really good about call centers, right?
Try.
Which is, if it weren't for call centers, I wouldn't have this control and confidence in my speech,
Hmm.
right? I wouldn't be able to speak the way that I do. I never did before then.
Fair enough.
So there's a beauty to it. There's an actual usefulness to it as well. But yeah, I was working in them, and I got a message from what I would say right now is a dude who was saying, I work for Ubisoft. I'd like to get you in on a project. We're going to have a 50-person team we're looking for specifically for VR. And I didn't believe it. I literally didn't believe it.
Hmm.
But a week later, real news broke. And they said exactly that. And I was like, ooh, how did I know about that before it happened? This must be real. So I messaged back. And yeah, I ended up in Germany a month later.
I see.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I got in the industry. Again, a little bit of luck and a bunch of YouTube videos.
It's also it seems to be the classic tale of a youngster who was spellbound by the industry or by the other products, and you just sort of oriented your whole life around it, right? And it's obvious that you're extremely passionate and very focused on it. So yeah, based upon what you've said, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all to hear that kind of story, because even watching one of your videos and how you present, even ignoring what you're doing, it's clear to see that you're extremely focused and passionate on the industry, and that's something that no one could ever fault you for from initial first impressions. How's your feelings about the VR industry at the moment? It's a very
Um,
general thing.
it's a little all over the place for me. I don't really know much when it comes to that. Really, it's
Well,
it's a
how
weird
do you
one. It's a weird
feel?
one.
I mean, I know that none of us know anything, right? There's so much speculation about everything. But what's your feeling about it? What's your vibe?
On on the one hand, I feel like there's kind of an unusualness. There's this settling of oh man, I don't want to say this, but I have to
Say it.
say it. There's a settling of mediocrity in the
Oh,
industry right now in
oh,
the game.
absolutely. Well, that goes without saying at all. You don't even need to be afraid of saying that. I've been saying that for years now. It's absolutely true. Utter mediocrity at best is dominating the VR industry at the moment, and it is a grand shame, in my
Funnily enough,
opinion.
I have a slightly expanded opinion on that. I think it's all moved too fast. It's
I
moved
agree.
way too fast, right? And I mean that in every area, like mechanics and quality and all of this. I think that if we had slowed down and carried on I say we, but I never really put out full releases. I put out plenty of demos instead. Um, but yeah, I can jump in on sort of physics, right? As a really good example. People took Boneworks, which very clearly stated itself as an experimental physics idea game, right? Which just before that released, there was a few things just popping up. I myself was working on physics just before then as well, and as such, there was obviously going to be different ideas on how to handle that. But as soon as Boneworks came out, everyone kind of picked that up as is, literally as that version of everything. No attempt to redesign or create something that expanded on those ideas or moved them about a little bit to do a little bit of the body systems better. And they basically forced that into becoming the global standard. And I think it was supposed to be experimental for a reason, because it was a bit unstable, it was a bit bouncy, it was I don't like the word because it's American, but janky. It's kind of the only way to say it these days.
Yeah, I
It's a
say that a
very
lot.
American term. It's a very American term. I never heard it until
Mm.
in fact, the only first time I heard it, wow, that was incorrect. The first time I'd heard that word was on Node's channel. Node being the guys who are
I used to
like
watch
Corridor
them.
Digital
Yeah.
as well as Stress Level Zero. Yeah. So that's the first time I even heard the word jank. But again, this is the internet. Once one word pops up, that's it. It's a global word now. But yeah, so that it kind of became the standard without anyone trying to, smooth it out, make it into something stable, more stable. Obviously, Stress Level will have gone ahead and made as much stability as they could with Bone Lab, but everyone else just kind of took it as it was, copied it as much as they could. Oop, your hand kind of makes a shape, and then they just built it as the baseline to everything. You've got to take it as it is and improve on it, right? It's something you have to do, but for the sake of views in many ways, for the sake of online views, it became the standard just by as it was, right? Just as it was without any improvements. And that's not good enough. And that's why it very, very quickly moved in that direction. And now there's so much wobbliness, there's so much jank, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And that's why, and this is going to touch right upon the things that you cannot stand, because I personally can't stand them as well, which is the NPC quality of games just went down the toilet after that point, especially on the VR side.
Mm.
Again, we just moved way too fast. It's crazy. And again, I'm trying to say words without sounding insulting.
I can do it
Because
for.
like I said,
It's okay.
I can be aggressive in my words as
Mm.
well. So I have to be super careful. But at the same time, everyone, come on, you gotta try a little harder sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Why do you think that happened then? Why do you think that they took the concept and didn't try to improve on it? Why has there been such little attempt at actually refining and improving things in the way that you said?
Um, there's kind of probably multiple elements to that. I think there's the one side which is just the internet side, which is, look at this. This is amazing. This is crazy. This is
Insane.
crazy. There's that element, and everyone's trying to achieve that. And you know what? I'm trying to achieve that, right? I'm trying to achieve something where people will truly feel that it's amazing. But I do want it to be authentic. I do want it to actually be um that. Oh, oh, there we go. Gotta center this properly.
Just
There we
broke your
go.
neck.
Um well, my head goes all
You're going
all
exorcist on me.
yeah. um yeah, I want my products to get to that point, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of, I don't know if you've noticed, well, you'll have definitely noticed this, you know, where everything that's a video now, which is your standard form of marketing, has to be social media. It has to, right? It's very powerful, and it's very, very capable of being, it's effectively free marketing, if you do it right. And um, that kind of means that everyone's going to use that, and so it uses its kind of the meta, the YouTube meta, or the shorts meta, or the TikTok meta, and as such everything has this unbelievable, just over the topness to it, of
Mm.
anything, no matter how good or bad the quality of what they're trying out. But at the same time, developers obviously try to do the same thing with their own videos, right? So, for example, and I I would like to say that I'm not entirely guilty of it when I say the same phrase, which is next gen physics gets used in areas where it's not next gen. In fact, it's not even current gen. It's like backwards.
Mm.
Those types of terms are there to push your video or push your product and advertise, but at the same time, when you use those terms wrong, or in a really, like, where they really don't deserve to be used, then it kind of poisons the well. it
Mm.
it uses up that term, and that term becomes meaningless as well, um which is sad.
I'm
but
so
but
fatigued
yeah,
on internet culture.
effectively,
I'm sorry
that's
to
that's
interrupt.
how. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I'm very fatigued by it, but, like, I wish I could just carry on making things the way that I do. So my videos, I know you said that you haven't really looked at them on purpose.
What
But
do you
yeah,
mean? No, no, no. I have. Of course, I have.
but yeah, in terms of, not really fully looking into me in the way that I do
Well, I
things.
haven't researched you as an individual, but I have watched a lot
Right.
of your videos. Yes, yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
fully aware of the things that you've been up to in a public sense from what you presented, but I haven't researched you specifically as an individual. That was my meaning.
Ah,
Ah.
I see. Okay. Well, so then there's a little bit more to it than that. I wasn't talking more of the actual content, but rather how I do the content, which is, you'll have noticed a lot of my videos have no cuts. They're one long form, fully recorded start to finish video
Very
where I'm just
jealous of you, by the way.
describing
I wish I could do
20 to
that.
30 minutes. And that's why when you said on the messages that actually I won't really be scripting much, I won't be writing down any questions. For me, it's not a difficulty, because I want my videos to be done that way anyway, right? I don't like this constant cutting, and the cutting has been really very, very detrimental on mental health as well.
Mm-hmm.
Constant cutting of videos, which is really bad for your attention span. But at the same time, it's this, it again goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which it ruins your ability to fully communicate something in full sentences, when you can just cut out all the white space, you can cut out all the ums and ahs, and yeah, it becomes very disingenuous. Everything's fake. Everything on the internet is fake, and I don't want my stuff to be fake,
Mm.
right? When I say next gen, I want it to be next gen. When I say physics based, It should be based on some bloody maths that are physics, you know? It shouldn't be a humanized concept of what we claim is physics. I don't want any of my stuff to be fake. And even in the video structure, it shouldn't be fake. It shouldn't sound like I'm saying something when really I didn't say anything like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of
Yeah,
going with the
I don't know
same.
what we were touching upon as the subject matter there, but that's where we ended up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's what this is all about. I'm kind of going the same angle, which you may have guessed anyway, with my stuff. I want to add an air of sincerity and a sort of down to earthness to the content I make, because I'm just so fatigued on the disingenuousness, as you say, that comes with the internet. And there are consequences that comes with being more direct and sincere and not pandering, but I'm willing to take those consequences. And it also means that you sort of bear yourself and all of your flaws too. But I think the people in the end kind of appreciate that, actually. And I think that what we need more so than ever when it comes to how we consume our online content is a bit more sincerity. Things that we can feel are honest, warts and all, and have some detail and nuance and aren't so manufactured and blah de blah de blah de blah de blah. You get what I mean. Copyright strike.
Oh,
No, it's fine.
I'm
It's fine.
gonna have to quickly switch
It's
out.
fine. You are obviously a massive fanboy of these older titles and Nintendo stuff and Sega stuff, right? It seems to have like had a huge influence on you.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't supposed to move
It's
studio.
all right.
So,
That's okay.
I'm going all over the place right now. I wanted to just very quickly switch to the wrong character. There we go. Beautiful. Yeah, so yes, I'm an absolute fan of the classics. Again, this is what put me in gaming, right? This is what put me into game development. And the other thing is, and this is how I kind of write my systems a little bit, is that I kind of use the quality standards of the old games as the baseline as well. You know, because especially when we look around at the new stuff, I have some words to say about things like this as well, which is I'll get to it actually. But yeah, I look at the old stuff, I look at the way that they handle things, and especially how they build their newer games, and how they improve on the older systems as a way to move forward for myself. I can describe it in a certain way, right? Which is from the oldest, because obviously I'm from them days when we had a SNES as well. You know, we had NES, we had SNES at the time.
I think we're
Those
about the
were the
same
things
age,
that
right? We're both in our mid to late 30s, correct?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah, so mid 30 for me.
yeah.
And you know, we're in that same era when we started in gaming, let's say, and we could watch as the fidelity scaled up, but also the quality scaled up,
Yes, very
right?
much.
And this
Yeah.
is how I like to really conceptualize this, which is if you think back, for example, Mario 64, I gave that example earlier. You've got texture resolutions of 32 by 32, or at best 32 by 64, right? Let's take the 32 square pixels. That's a very low fidelity resolution, right? Low fidelity because low resolution. Fidelity being the capacity for quality, like the capacity for doing something. Your hardware limitation, your software limitation. The capacity to do something is your fidelity, and then you know what you can do on it is your quality. It's your results, whatever, right? And if you look at what they did with those resolutions, it all looked quite good. Even though it was all low res, it looked quite good. Now, in the modern world, what people can do is they can take an emulator for the Nintendo 64, and they can do what is called a high res texture replacement, right? So they can replace the textures on the fly at runtime. And so what people do is they take the 32 by 32 square textures of Mario 64, they ramp up the resolutions to 4K, 4096, which is crazy amounts bigger, and then the detail that they put in just doesn't suit the game, right?
Artistically,
So
it
what,
clashes.
but it's not just artistically, it's a little bit more than that, what I'm trying to address here,
Okay.
which is the fidelity increased, let's say 100-fold or more than that, probably 1,000-fold even sometimes, and the quality did not increase at all. In fact, we might even say it went backwards,
I see.
right? And that tends to happen across the board now, where people are very aware they really can't stand things like open world games and this excessive scale, right? You used to have something like, maybe, let's say, Oblivion, Skyrim, right? You've got a certain scale, and it's all detailed, it's filled up, it's populated. And then you expand into universe sized scale, and they just use the procedurally generate the whole thing, and people really got sick and tired of it, right?
Mm.
People see the lack of detail, even though the fidelity has increased by 1,000-fold. Your capacity to do more is there, but you've done less. You've actually spread out less detail over a massive space. And that's exactly what happened with the texture resolutions. That's what's happened right across the board in terms of gameplay mechanics as well. The fidelity has increased. And I'll give an example in VR, which really has irked me recently. It touches upon what I said about the next gen usage of the term next gen, which is someone, oh man, I don't want to slander a dev here, for example, but I have to say what I have to say, which is, in my systems, I haven't done ragdoll fingers yet, just because I don't see necessity yet. I want to get to that point because there's a massive ramp up in the amount of collisions that happen when you do that. But you go from stiff, pre-animated hands, which is what you're seeing here. It's just a set of positions and rotations. And you can see an example of that in game, in Half-Life Alyx, where all the fingers have collision, but they're not ragdoll. They're not separate physics joints. When you increase the fidelity to go into full ragdoll, right, you've suddenly got a massive amount more processing, right? And you've created this ragdoll, this little bit of flexibility. But when you look at your fingers in reality, they're not that flimsy. They're actually probably stronger. If you were to just hold your fingers out and then like as a sort of cup shape, 90 degrees finger, and then just try and push it with your other hand's fist, just push it to try and open those fingers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll see that there we go, you'll see that your fingers are much stronger than you could have imagined. They're not flimsy. So when people do ragdoll in VR for fingers, they tend to make them so flimsy that the results look worse, right? It looks like it's interacting properly, but really you've got a lesser quality result. And you can't even climb or anything with them. It's not like they've given you more functionality. They haven't given you increased functionality. You've just increased the fidelity for no reason and done nothing about the quality. Your
Mm.
fidelity went up, your quality did not go anywhere. You have to work step by step for that to feel consistent and feel like it's working out correctly. And that's kind of where I was heading with that. This idea of like I said, this is what I like to conceptualize is, if you're going to increase the fidelity, you better increase your quality, you better increase the results as well with it. And that should happen with your NPCs. You've got all these complex physics going on under the hood, but they can't do anything. They can't do anything. And that's just not good enough.
I agree with you, but I also find it baffling how that would even be a thing to begin with. Like, what you're saying to me is complete common sense, that yes, you can have all the fancy physics, but if the NPCs just stumble over on a stairway and they just path towards you in the most basic way, surely when that experience was being designed, they must have had the same thought. Or are they just so up their own arses and so self-impressed with the systems that they've made that they don't really think about what actually makes sense?
So Okay, so this is a more in-depth one, right? And again, this is just coming from someone who's kind of built those systems a little bit as well, right? It's not the up one's ass situation, right? It's not that.
Uh-huh.
Maybe in future it becomes that, but where it starts is not that, right? You build a ragdoll character, and I'm not talking about all these flimsy, flipping pinned in place things that you see in a lot of games. I'm talking, obviously, we're starting here with Boneworks, right? Where it was kind of first introduced to the major public. Let's look at what they did. They were trying to firstly implement your physics hands, but also they made NPCs that were actual ragdoll. And I mean actual, none of the pinned in place stuff. You can feel how the strong joints kind of hold together properly in an accurate manner, right? And on the one hand, it absolutely deserves praise to even take that risk, to take that step. With those things, you've got such complex ways of doing things now. In order to make them just stand idle, you have to make them stand up, right? Which is already a far more complex thing than animate an object, a dude who's a character model, animate him standing idle, and then just add a capsule collider on him so that a capsule shaped collider so that you can collide with them, right? That's the simplified standard for every game before you do ragdoll. But when you've got ragdoll, firstly you have to do all of the jointing systems and make them actively capable of moving in a manner that's fast enough that it makes even sense. Like it actually looks like a humanoid character. And at the same time, you have to have some logical balancing systems that don't make it feel like when the player pushes on them, they're a brick wall. There has to be some balance. So what you end up with is either you go too extreme one side where there's no point of having them ragdoll because they're so infinitely strong, and they just act like brick walls and solid colliders anyway. Or on the other hand, where they're basically flimsy, and those are the two extremes, right? And if you don't find the right balance, you might not be able to get them to stand up firstly, which is why sometimes they fall over by themselves, and sometimes and pretty much every time they can't walk upstairs, they fall over stairs, they can't walk down or up and up ramps, they fall over those things because you're trying to keep this consistency for a ragdoll character that can stand up. And at the same time, when they then perform attacks or try and move around, again, you're trying to keep that consistency, right? You're trying to keep them fully ragdoll at all times without faking it with animation, replacing them. Actually, I want to touch on something you'd mentioned before, and unfortunately, I mentioned this in the comment,
Mm.
but I think I have to disappoint you with one statement of unfortunate fact,
School
which
me,
is
school me. That's why I'm here.
when you mentioned in the previous discussion with Vitriol, with Lee, when
Red
you
Dead
mentioned
Redemption
that
2.
GTA, yes, GTA and Red Dead Redemption, they used what is known as the Euphoria engine. Euphoria made by, I think, Natural Motion was the
Mm.
company's name. Now they stopped making that for games as a plugin or as an engine for ragdoll systems. But at the same time, so only Rockstar really has the license right now, or maybe one other company. I don't know. It was in the Force Unleashed as well, I think, and they stopped doing that. But it carried on, obviously, in Rockstar Games' games, and they kind of had to modify it because, firstly, it was really difficult to work with, is what they mentioned in some developer diaries, and they also don't use it at all times, right? So your characters are not 100% ragdoll at all times. They are full standard animators, the way you normally do all of your character control systems in a typical game, until some event causes them to go off balance or a situation where they need to use the ragdoll. So if you punch them, or if you run into them, or if you push them, or hit them with a car, or hit them with a horse in Red Dead Redemption, then they immediately switch in, and they do it so seamlessly. They immediately switch into Ragdoll, where they have these really clever advanced balancing systems, which is the stuff that you really it tricks you into believing they're always ragdoll because it's that good, right? And that is great for what they're using it for. Unfortunately, one, they're not always active ragdolls. So they're not actually all the complex things like running around, shooting, and rolling. They're not doing that while in ragdoll. So it's not actually been done. But also, that engine is all about making a realistic response and self-preservation, right? A realistic response to an environmental scenario. So if you fall off a ledge, they try and catch themselves, they try and roll over stairs. They actually, when I've studied the way they move, and they actually push themselves with their legs and hands when they roll downstairs so that they continue rolling downstairs.
Interesting.
So that they produce on purpose, instead of self-preservation, they actually produce more of an action sequence, and they cause more damage to the character on purpose to make it look good, right? So it's not entirely self-preservation, but it could be. It could be. They could do that with that system, but that's not good enough to be able to build a full character that can do all the things we want them to do while staying in complete live true ragdoll. What you'll see in pretty much any game, most games nowadays, and you see this very often in sports games, in the EA, EA sports type sports games, is this kind of partial ragdoll, what Ubisoft used to call partial ragdoll, which is they're animated, so they're entirely their standard capsule shaped collider that is sliding around and moving around the world as a character control. Under that, there is an animated character model, which is then being pulled about by some pinpointed, so pinned in space, in place in the world, pinned in place ragdoll points, right? So they're flexible, they can respond to anything, but they're very, very light, extremely light. They're like 1 kilogram total, and they have very, very high powered springs holding them in place. So as soon as you push them out of place and you slip, they immediately reposition themselves. They're not actual, well, they are live ragdolls, they're physics objects, but they're designed to just have some physical response to collision and nothing else. They don't actually have a structure that is supposed to fall over or anything. There's none of that ragdoll physics. It's just a flexible position in space, um, acting a little bit like particle systems. When you can kind of push particles around, there's no real impact to doing so. They just kind of move out of the way. When you see sort of physics trees or plants in a game, where as you're walking, they push out of the way, and then you move past and they push back to normal, and that's it. That's what these things are basically designed to do. And that's literally intentional. That's the design of the partial or simplified animated ragdoll. I think Unreal Engine calls them animated ragdolls. Those are a different thing. So that's the easy way to do it. That's how you can basically do your traditional animated characters, but still have some element of ragdoll. And you can feel that in VR because you're so close to it. You can feel how these things that you're playing with are just very, very light, flimsy character models that are pinned in place. You kind of move their arm out of place, and everything kind of stays in place except for that one joint. And then as soon as you let go, that joint moves linearly into position. Of course, in reality, your arms are much more complex. The position of your hand is not a linear position, in space. It's from the wrist, a rotation, from the elbow, a rotation, from the upper arm, a rotation, from the shoulder, a rotation, from the chest, from the spine, from the hip. And if you wanted to go all the way, it goes all the way to the foot, which is then using friction to hold
Yeah.
itself in place from the ground. So the actual motion of these things is a completely different thing. And you, as a human, you've spent 30 odd years viewing humans, you know how they move. You know this is fake.
Yeah.
And it ruins the immersion immediately.
That will tie
Anyway,
very
sorry, I
nicely.
went
No, no,
really
no.
complex.
That's fine. That's fine. That's again, you are the knowledgeable one. I think that will tie very nicely into the work that you're doing. But I want to press on something that you said that I think can still tie very neatly into talking more about your present work and what you're looking to achieve. You said that the kind of ragdoll system that is in games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and so on, the thing that Rockstar is doing, you said that that won't be good enough for a VR input or a motion control input. And I want to press on you a bit more and ask why, though, because just looking at the results that we would get from games like even GTA 4, that's back in the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era, that had that similar physics or ragdoll system, I remember, that was very, very impressive back in the day and to be computed on those much lower power consoles. It looks great. It looks really appropriate, and the way that they behave, it looks like the best of both worlds. So, could you explain a bit more why it's not appropriate for VR? Because from my layman eyes, it seems to be perfect for VR.
Okay, so I didn't mean that one wasn't entirely appropriate for VR, right?
Okay.
I talked about two systems. One being the animated ragdolls and partial ragdolls that you see nowadays, which is the pinned in place flexible weirdness, very flimsy stuff. And then the other is true ragdolls, the Euphoria engine, which you're talking about, which is the GTA stuff. So let's hone in on the GTA stuff. Um, they are designed to respond to only perform that response element, right? Which is not it's not active, real as you're moving ragdoll. And you're right in that it would be perfectly appropriate to use that in the exact same way GTA uses it, right?
Hmm.
But in that scenario, you don't have the ragdoll active in the little play about elements, right? For a live NPC that is maybe an enemy that is trying to shoot you, it's a perfect scenario because you're not going to get close to them and slowly move their arm to see the flexible ragdoll because that doesn't exist while they're just standing around fully in control. Only once they're completely out of control, when they lose control, when they've been shot or when they've been pushed, only then they become ragdoll, right?
Hmm.
So that works as a visual response perfectly, and obviously impacts the world because it's an actual physics object rolling around as well. It works perfectly if you're building that type of world and that type of game. If you're building what, for example, Bone Lab is going for, it's not appropriate for that scenario because they're not ragdoll when they're standing around, when they're moving around, right? And your body is a full, physics setup. Um, so it's a matter of design. It's not a matter of them being inappropriate for VR. For the games that are trying to be physics-based games, which I know some of you are actually sick of that, but for those games, it's not appropriate. For every other game, it's probably the best scenario, right? It is the best thing you could do where you have all of the control of your standard animated characters. They can do anything, literally anything and everything. And immediately upon being hit, they look like live characters when they ragdoll instead of just whoop and then flop, right? So it's all of the same times where you see a character switch to ragdoll, only that switch to ragdoll has been replaced with a very clever active strength system that the character looks like they're still alive, they're trying to hold themselves, they're trying to balance. That part of it has been replaced. It's not a different system in its entirety. It's still your standard game character, but the ragdoll element where they get shot and they turn into ragdoll, that has been replaced with a much more advanced version of it. And that's what Euphoria is. That's where it's supposed to be. And that it's perfect. It could be used in VR. But again, then we go back to where the real problem for that. If you wanted to build something like Euphoria in VR, firstly, you ain't getting the license. That's not happening. And because they don't do it anymore. And secondly, you're going to have to start thinking of ways to do full, true, active ragdolls that isn't just the partial ragdoll stuff.
Why?
Uh,
It doesn't have to be that way, though. You say that we have to think of that, but we don't, though. Like, I get that we're in VR and that we can use motion to control things, but I personally would be much happier with a system like it is in RDR2, where you can perform actions toward an NPC and they respond appropriately. And I wouldn't personally care if I can't grab them or move them around in a passive state or have everything be fully physical. I would rather have the trade-off of there being genuine AI and intelligence and gameplay in exchange for not being able to touch and fidget with everything. Like, I don't think that that has to be a thing in VR.
No, no, no. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm not saying. And so when I say you have to, I don't mean it in the way that you just meant it, right?
okay.
I don't mean you have to build my system. I'm saying that is the actual process of building something that does that. In order for it to, like, literally, I'm talking the mechanical, literally the programming side of things. It's a difficult task. It's a very difficult task to produce that, right? That's
Mhm.
what I mean. To make it look like that, that's why Euphoria has not really been copied, and all the AAA's kind of just found the easy way out. Um, and everyone kind of followed suit once Unreal started putting it in their basic engine, which was animated ragdolls. It's very difficult to do that in a realistic way, especially in the way that Euphoria does, right?
Sure,
People have tried, and people have sometimes kind of got a good result. But maybe they're not VR devs. So it's just a simple matter of it's an actual difficult thing that you would actually need to try and innovate on. You'd actually need to try and put the effort in that specific area to build that.
sure, sure. I mean,
That
I don't have any comprehension about how difficult these things are, but I fully respect and understand that they are very difficult things to do and process and to think about. But when I say things like, why can't it be like this thing or this way, I also I don't mean I don't mean completely. For example, you can look at a system like they have in RDR2, and yes, putting that entire thing together from scratch from other devs would be extremely difficult and time-consuming thing to do. Well, that's why your project has taken so many years, after all. But I don't see any reason why other devs can't just take one or two aspects of that system rather than integrate the full thing and just incorporate like a few of the most entertaining elements of that where they only activate or only a tiny part of it comes into play but greatly enhances the feedback that the player gets. So when I say like why it doesn't have to be that way, I guess I struggle to I struggle to see why devs who realize, yes, I can't build that entire system, but I am good enough to put a tiny bit of that system into my project so that it can just add that little bit of, it can enhance things a little bit more. Or am I completely off base with my expectations here?
you're not. And unfortunately, I have to say the harsh truth. Well, what I believe is the harsh truth, which is they just don't want to. They just haven't bothered to do it.
Oh, okay.
Really, what you're saying
I'm sad to be
is
right.
completely feasible. Yeah, it's very very easily feasible. Set up a ragdoll, set up a system where when your character gets hit or pushed, it it switches to ragdoll mode. That's a standard thing. It's always been a standard thing in gaming, and give them a little bit of drive in their joints so that they can correct themselves a little bit. Choose an angle that they should try and pause into, and boom, you know. If you ever played a game called Sumatory Dreams,
No.
it does that, right? It's a very very simple. It's like a old. I think it's made in its own little, very crappy looking engine, and it's beautifully crappy. It's a beautiful game, and YouTubers have played it because it's got that weirdness to it. There's a few games out there in the desktop space, 2D, not 2D, but desktop games that are, heavily active ragdoll. They look like that. You can do that. Devs have done that plenty. it absolutely can be done, and I just think that the VR devs haven't wanted to do that. On my end, it's a different story because I have done my version of that, and I've got plenty to say about it on how it works. But yeah, like I said, I just think that they just don't want to because
It's very
people
sad.
kind of find an easy way out sometimes, you
Yeah,
know.
it's
And
yeah.
again, I'm trying so hard not to be insulting, but I think everyone, including myself, we just look in the mirror and recognize that we're being bloody lazy, man.
Yeah, I'm always second guessing myself about what I say, and I always try to ground my critiques and my opinions from a place of common sense of a user and from what I understand I've seen develop in the technology world. And I'm sad to hear what you've just said, even though it has confirmed that it is actually a possibility. And I just think to myself, if I were a dev, this is what I would do. Like, I would clearly acknowledge that I'm not going to build this ingenious system all by myself, but I also might have a sense of, oh, that like this particular impulse or reaction is fun in and of itself. Is that little element of this system able to be mimicked or copied without doing the entire thing? And for me, this is like a real brain dead obvious thing that I would assume most devs would think about or consider, or but clearly not. And it's really sad to hear, I guess. But that's where you come in with your the TX engine. What was it, TZ or TX? I'm sorry, is it TX?
Yeah, so it's a very dumb. This it's the prototype name, but the
What does
story
TX
behind
mean?
it, the story behind it is unbelievably dumb.
Okay.
Um, I while building ragdoll systems, I needed a character that could kind of float around, so that I didn't have to do legs, but it would just be as is. So what you see is what you get. The ragdoll is exactly what you see, and so I chose penguins. And as a result, there is one very well known penguin who's called Tux, and it became Project Tux.
Ah, gotcha. So there we
It's
have.
so the actual original project files is just called penguins. The folder's called like my actual project's called penguins.
So there we have the deep
And
Nimso lore.
oh yeah, it's unbelievably dumb. It's unbelievably dumb. But yeah, that's not the final name. It's just I needed some prototype name, and that's what I went with for a long while now. It it became Project Tux.
So how's TX or so how's Tux going then?
How's Tux going? Well, there's no more penguins in there.
Hmm.
I actually figured out how to get really good looking procedural animated legs that don't have any animations involved. But there we go. Now I have full humanoid characters. Okay, so ooh,
Yeah, it's a
let's
broad
talk
question.
about
I know.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very broad
Go
now.
on.
So there's kind of two things by name. I kind of labeled a massive set of systems that I've been working on for years. I've labeled the whole thing hybrid presence, right? That's just the name that you'll hear a bunch in my videos.
It's very
The
fancy, very
game,
marketable.
yes, it's hybrid presence engine. Why? Because it's a whole set of systems. And it's everything I ever worked on in VR since I started, which was about a decade ago. So it includes locomotion concept. Ooh, you know what? If we're gonna go in this complex subject, we'll just go through each thing individually, right?
If you want to.
Locomotion. You've said a number of times, and unfortunately, I both agree and disagree with you in many ways. You've said why can't we just have arm swinger in there all the time, because arm swinger is what makes you feel really like you're actually performing the action.
Hmm.
Um, now, I have to start by saying I cannot stand arm swinger.
Why?
Right? I just actually I'll get to that. I'll detail it
Okay.
because it doesn't actually do what you do in reality, right?
Hmm.
And this is going to sound like an advert for what I built. It's
Oh,
going
do
to
it,
sound like
man.
an advert.
Yeah, do it.
Right. So when it came to VR movement, like I said, my first video on VR was movement systems. Right. I wanted to feel how is it to walk through VR. So I recognized back then that in order to walk, you literally have to move your foot up and down, and as such, your head slightly bobs.
No way.
It's unbelievable. I know it's shocking. It's shocking information. I've just revealed something miraculous. Now, so I just took the head bob and built a little head bob based system. Now, I called it at the time locomotion, right? Great name. After a while, I gave it a name. Once locomotion became a name, I called it walk-o-motion, right? Walking, walk-o-motion. Um, Unfortunately, there was one problem with it. When you ran, it felt great, right? Because you were jogging on the spot, you were moving at a speed that felt right for your jogging. But when you were trying to walk, it was a pain in the ass because you had to lift your head slightly, which meant you kind of had to put so much effort into tiptoeing very slightly on each of your feet. So it became really annoying. Eventually, I settled on this sort of hybridized system, which there's some parallels to what you've been saying, right? Which is you push the joystick to move in a specific direction, right? Because that was always a thing from the very beginning. You use the joystick to direct you. I can't stand the idea of only moving forward. I just find it so stupid.
I agree.
You use the joystick to direct you in a direction, which we'll talk about the advanced ways in which you can calculate that as well. You use the joystick to direct you, and that gives you a very slight bit of smooth motion, right? Slow. You move slow when you use the joystick. As you jog, it ramps you up into whatever jog speed you're at.
I said
So you've
exactly
got
the same thing. Yeah. I'm sorry.
exactly.
Yeah, it's
I
great.
know. I heard you say that, but it's a little bit more than that. So what I realized is I wanted a bit of a walking feel still because I want to walk around and smooth loco just feels wrong to me. So you get a tiny bit of motion when you push the joystick, but it's not a walk speed. It's slower than that. In order to walk, you lean your weight slightly to your right foot and then slightly to your left foot, resulting in your head very slightly swaying left, right, left, right. And that is the walk speed increaser. So as you push your joystick in the direction you want to go, you can slightly walk in position without having to lift your feet off the ground at all. You just put your weight on one side and weight on the other, and it's very, very slight. You just basically sway very slightly, and you get up to a nice maximum walk speed. And then as you go from your sway, leaning on the foot, leaning on the other foot, you can go into a jog and my head tracking goes all crazy. You can go into a jog from your sway, and that goes into your speed, your jog speed. So now we've got a hybridized locomotion system, which is great because I get to call it hybrid. And yeah, it's three pieces all at once, which is great because I've only got three fingers on this character model. So three pieces all at once. You push the joystick in the direction you want to go. You can sway to walk, and of course, this is all complete analog. You can choose how fast you want to go, and you can move into a jog and jog to run. It feels so much better. If you haven't had a chance, there was a demo about it, which is the hybrid locomotion demo. Again, it's on my HEO page.
Okay.
I said again, I never mentioned it before, so that was wrong.
It's
But
on
there
your
we go.
what page? Your HEO page.
Itch.io. Yeah,
itch.io. Okay, I've
yeah,
never
the
been
indie gaming
on that
site.
before. Okay.
Yeah, it's the indie gaming site. I put all my earlier demos on there,
Okay.
and there's a bunch of non-VR demos on there as well. But yes, that's what happened with the loco system, and it feels to me it just feels right. And I'll mention something. We'll move into a different subject very smoothly with that, but I want to hear you say something. Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you. It sounds good, but I can already see the message boards and the comments of people disagreeing that this is good. That's the audacity of having to make them move their body even in the manner of swaying, is just unacceptable to them. And these are very loud people, and I'm getting pissed off even thinking about it, and I just don't understand where these people are coming from. But that's beside the point. What I did want to say is I get what you're saying about the arm swinger, and I can understand why you would dislike it, and I'm going to hold my guns on this one because I think that whilst the traditional arm swinger definitely would need to be phased out, especially because you can't strafe, and that is a big thing, really agree, that's a massive downside of it, I think that there is still value to be had in implementing a system where, say, if you are playing your typical shooter game and you're holding a rifle, that rather than do like a random arm swinger to move forward, what you could instead do is sort of hold the rifle in front of your character's chest and sort of lightly sway it from side to side, and the game detects the position of the rifle, kind of how we would do in real life, to then allow your character to move into a faster sprint or jog, as opposed to doing the sort of jilted and perhaps unnatural arm swinger in that way. I still think that there is something in incorporating the arms, but in unison with what your virtual character should appropriately be doing in that context, but the player should have to do it very lightly. So just like a very gentle sway back and forth of the rifle in front of your chest, left and right, or diagonally left and right, to activate a sprint. I think that that could be not intrusive and still very, very immersive, very cool, and very minimal effort from the player, whilst also balancing the gameplay, because they have to do this movement and they can't just point their weapon forward and slide constantly without any consequences. And what do you think?
I'm raring to jump in on this.
Okay, go on. Tell me.
Okay, you're gonna love it. So
Okay.
I also thought the same thing back when I built that loco demo. And I wanted to, so this is what I meant by smoothly moving into a different subject. And that subject is accessibility, right?
Uh-huh.
So one thing I realized, and I know your feelings on it, and I'm gonna give you my harsh feelings on accessibility as well, but we'll get to that in a moment. One thing I realized is that the walking system, the running system, is gonna be a bit of a problem for anyone sitting down, right? And I don't want them sitting down unless they need to, right? Which is different. I don't want people to play who are perfectly able to play VR games in that way unless they're super tired, there's going to be some element of that, right? But I still wanted to try and build some accessibility features because I wanted to do something where my same sort of similar parts of my locomotion system could make people who can't stand at least feel like they're running, right? Give them a little bit of an element of that.
That's good.
So what I did is I kind of mixed the two. For seated/accessibility mode, there is some element of arm swinger. But what I couldn't stand about arm swinger was not just the idea of swinging it back and forth and all of that, but also the rapid running speed. Like no one does that. In fact, in my early demo of walking motion, when I said to people jog on the spot, they automatically, and I've watched videos of people do this, they automatically started throwing their feet up and down, and their head wasn't moving at all. And you think, hang on a minute, you know very well I'm not tracking your feet. What are you doing? Also, that's not how people run in reality. In reality, what happened was people started doing the gym run, jog on the spot, says your teacher in primary school. They started doing that instead of actually trying to, naturally jog at a speed that they would normally do in reality. I kind of half lost my train of thought here. But yeah, effectively the same thing happened with hand tracking, right? Not hand tracking, but with arm swinger, where instead of having a natural how your arms would swing in reality, people started going like this as the arm swinger, and it just didn't make sense to me.
Well, they're morons.
So I I try to avoid using the words that I love
It's
using,
just
but
being
there we go.
they're just being dumb. They're just being morons. Yeah.
It's the inherent accidental nature of it, right? I've got another thing about that, but we'll get to it in a moment.
Uh-huh.
We're going to end up talking about game controllers. So what I did, I used my hybridized systems. Oh yeah, I love using the word hybrid nowadays. Everything's hybrid now. So I hybridized. I had a tiny bit. When you're sitting down, and especially if your feet are not touching the ground, if you swing your hands like this, you'll notice that your applied forces are forcing your head to move. Where's that right hand? There we go. To move very slightly the opposite way. So your lifted hand here, for example, this is my right hand. As soon as my right hand lifts, my head goes to that side. As soon as my left hand lifts, my head goes very slightly to that side, right? And so what I did is I mixed the two. And that meant that with these two sets of values, I could have it so that when you actually sway at a faster speed, that is the more realistic speed at which you would sway your head and hands when you're running, that is the speed of a run, right? And so I ended up with this nice balanced system. But I even took that further, where for my animation systems, I can simulate the controllers under the hood. This is the way that I write my systems now. I added an extra layer of tracking between the actual controllers and what I pull in from my game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I added an extra layer so that I could simulate it however I want, even with hand tracking. But what I did is anytime one of your controllers is not available, so if you have one hand, or if you're only able to use one hand, the other controller will swing in the same manner once you start swinging your other hand.
Interesting. Okay. That's very
And so you
smart.
end up with a system that is a locomotion system that's reading your arm swinger and requires both hands to swing opposite each other, by the way. So you can't just do this. It actually reads to make sure both are swinging while your head sways slightly, very, very slightly. But it still reads it correctly because even though one hand is gone, it's simulated to do the exact opposite of this one while you're in a jog.
So there's like
So
a
it
ghost
actually
controller
animates
that
in the same way.
mirrors the action
Yeah,
of the other.
it, it's there's a fluidity to it. It's just beautiful. You can test this in that hybrid demo.
Yeah, it sounds really
But
good.
yeah, it was just a bunch of ideas, right? It might work beautifully for some people. It might not. In the end, I still allow full joystick motion in my systems, right? One of the things that I do when I write a movement system is that it's not directly coupled with the locomotion input. I replaced, again, I do this whole simulated layer stuff with all of my work now, where the locomotion element, the input that is coming from locomotion, so what speed are you jogging, or are you pushing the joystick, all of that is a locomotion system that is then driven into the movement system, right? And so the movement can take any locomotion, and it doesn't impact the way that I code the movement.
Could
So
you?
now I
I'm
can just
sorry.
implement I can implement any loco system under the hood without any code effort.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to clarify what is the difference between a locomotion system and a movement system? Because for me, they are interchangeable. How are you differentiating them there?
They are the same thing, but I needed a name for both.
Oh, okay.
So under the hood, what I needed was a name for the calculated input. So what is the human doing conceptually? Are they jogging in place? Are they performing an intentional move forward, move right, whatever, right? And the system in the game that moves the character controller, the actual code of moving it. And in my systems, obviously, that's a physics-based applied movement force, right?
Hmm.
So the movement force, the movement system, and then the locomotion system, which is the input system, right? And then, of course, I also separate that from direction. So what you can do is you can drive the direction anyhow. So it can use the right hand, left hand, whichever, head directed, hand directed, or my special hybrid directed. Again, another little thing I'll talk about. You can use any of those direction systems, with any of the locomotion systems. Because remember, all of them are joystick controlled in terms of their direction, right?
Okay.
So yeah, just switching to that subject for a very short time, you're also able to use both the head and hands for direction. So what I realized was, if I really didn't like the head directed motion stuff, right? Where you move in a forward direction of your controller is attached to where your head is looking, because it meant I couldn't look around unless I kept moving the joystick, right? On the other hand, with hand directed, you get a different problem where if you're swinging a sword or a sledgehammer or something, or you're moving your hands quite erratically, suddenly you start throwing yourself about, because moving forward when you turn your hand right moves you right? So I realized if I take the orientation of the controller and start factoring in its movement, then I can get a nice blend where the good parts of head directed motion are used when necessary, and the good parts of controller directed motion are used when necessary, as a nice blend between the two.
But how do you
So
determine when it's necessary?
it's basically based on the tilt of the hand along with a little bit of its motion. It's very, very simple.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's another thing, and you'll have felt this before. One of the reasons, one of the things that I hate about VR games inherently is that you hold your hands out like this. So in order to be in the tracker's zone right now, I'm putting my hands out like this. No one ever puts their hands to their sides. Obviously, right now I can't show it because I'm not using VR tracking, but literally to your hips. You know how you would when you're actually standing in reality or walking in reality. So I noticed when you try and do that in most games, if you're controller directed, your controller's pointing downwards. Oh, I don't think my hand can point down in this with this tracker. Your controller's pointed downwards. And the problem there is your forward direction keeps switching between up, which is forward, and down, which is back behind you. Because your hand's just about swinging past that point where the forward of the controller flips around because it's upside down. So I hybridized that as well, right? I took the head direction as a sort of overarching forward part of your body, like your chest forward, and if your controllers are upside down and behind you and going backwards, then it flips that round, and you end up still going forward. So you never actually flip round as your arm swings past the bottom.
Oh. It
So yeah,
sound
every little detail had to be thought out beautifully.
it sounds to me, and I don't mean to boil it down to something so simplistic, but the impression that I'm getting so far that sort of underpins all the work that you've done to this moment is that compared to practically the results of anything else I've seen in VR, you have just looked at your you have just paid you have seemingly have just paid attention to your body and the subtle nuances and details of how moving one part of your body will affect another, and you've made a mental note of that and have just been applying that gradually into your systems over the years. It just feels like you really have taken the time and attention to notice, oh, our body actually does that. Oh, our elbow is actually usually here when our hand is here, and our shoulder does that, and our torso does this, and so on and so forth. Would I be correct in that observation?
Yeah. So I was again. I have a very lucky blend of history with me. I happen to be a graphics designer and animator before doing the coding part.
Excellent.
So
Yeah.
humanoid animation involves you really looking at every movement of how a body really moves. If you look at any informational video of someone telling you how to animate a walk cycle, they will describe to you the biomechanics of a human being,
Hmm.
right? Or an animal, whatever you're trying to animate. They will teach you biomechanics because they need to. And when you look at professional animators when they're doing things, and of course, I saw this as well when I was working at Ubisoft. I see it now when I'm working with SideQuest right now, and I see it with any animators where you gotta really look at the details of what you're trying to replicate in the real world, and implement that in your animation, or in my case, implement that in a mathematical way, on your procedural systems, which in this world, which is why actually I started doing body systems a long time ago in VR, where you have to figure out how your shoulder should move, how your elbows should move when you're trying to get them from the 3-point tracking that you have available to you, right? You've got available tracking from your headset and your hands, and that's all you have. And that's the consumer standard. We can't just keep saying, oh, you just need full body tracking in order to show the elbows. You can't do that. You have to look at how your elbow moves in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
and try and match that. And I did the same thing with shoulders, right? Where there's a limitation to when your arm is out to the side and you lift it, your upper arm lifts for halfway, and then after that point your shoulder starts to lift,
Yeah.
right? There's a physical limitation on that upper arm. And when you're building ragdoll systems, you kind of put the physical limitations into the actual limitations in the physics engine. So you literally can't lift the upper arm more than that. Right now, I allow it to happen just because my systems aren't perfect yet. But over time, I will eventually actually solidify the real limitations of physical bodies. But yeah, it's the same thing with feet. I kind of watched for my procedural leg system. I watched how once you're in a walk cycle, the wideness of your stance changes compared to when you're standing idle. And as you walk, and I described this in my leg video, which is as you walk, you stay on the ground. Pretty much, one of your feet are always planted on the ground. And as you go into a jog or run, you start actually floating,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Your foot touches the ground, and then there's a short moment where both of your feet are off the ground. A
Yeah.
regular procedural leg system, if you don't account for this, it's not going to look good. It looks like that sort of tip, 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 tip. You end up with that same problem that we had with hand tracking, hand swinger and arm swinger and all of that. So it's the same thing over and over and over. Every bit of VR requires you to now look at a human and say, I'm going to replicate you. I'm going to turn you into a replicant. I'm going to clone the crap out of you into my hyperdrone, and you're going to become virtual.
Mm.
Yeah, I like all those references.
When you're developing a system, such as when you move a certain limb, you make sure that another part of the avatar's body moves appropriately, so that it's all doing all the physics stuff that is important and makes sense. How long does that take, and how complex is it really in terms of doing all the coding and stuff?
I think one thing that most coders will tell you is that the resulting code eventually is always a lot simpler. It's always a lot simpler than than you might think.
It's human nature, yeah,
Um,
sure.
even for the coder themselves, when you've got that final version of your code, it looks so nice and easy to understand sometimes. But other times you've made such a mess, right? You've made an incredible mess and you rewrite it. And I have a bad habit of rewriting things because I can make them so much nicer
I'm
over
not
time.
surprised to hear that, Mr.
Yeah,
Nimso.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know, I know you. You already know it. You
Hmm.
already know it.
So,
Um,
as an
it,
example, then, if you were, say, for example, you wanted to develop a system where you tilt your head from side to side, or you lean forward a little bit, or the headset is moving forward a bit, and you want the torso to follow, or you want the shoulder to move a bit with the torso or with the arm, could you tell me how long would it take for you to code a reasonably working system like that? And how
now,
difficult is it?
nowadays, because I've already gone through the logic of it so many times, I could do it within a few hours,
And how
right?
long did it take you to go through it so many times, though? I'm more interested in the initial build-up rather than the end result.
Complex one because it's a result of constant tweaking over years, right?
Why has it
What
taken
I
years, though?
my it's just it's just a weird way of doing things. This is how it ends up. It's sort of so the way that normal world innovation works is that one generation will build something and the next generation will fix it and improve it and the next generation will fix it and improve that.
Hmm.
I've kind of squeezed that into 10 years of my own life. So I just became my own next generation constantly. A lot of people maybe picked up a few things and tried to improve on them, but not everyone was kind of focused on doing that. Everyone was making money while I wasn't, right? That's the reality of it.
Mm.
And they did a good job on the business side, but I didn't. On the
So,
other hand,
uh,
this is what I was doing.
so to go back to what you said, then you said the end result is that it would take you a couple of weeks to put something together that's functional. Is that correct, or did I mishear you?
um, it took years to
To
conceptualize
iterate.
it
Oh,
properly,
uh-huh.
to iterate it, but now I could put a nice system of any of these specific details together in a few hours.
In a few hours. Okay. And did it take years to iterate because it was extremely difficult to work with the code and the software, or was it that you were directing your focus to so many places? For example, if you made moving the torso with your head or arms your only focus to iterate on and then get a result, would you have done it much sooner than many years, you think?
Well, I think each of those was done in that same way that you mentioned,
Okay.
where each little bit, and you can see it in videos, right? I know that it wasn't for me. The results weren't put into production games. Instead, they were kind of documented through history in videos, which I kind of got lucky that I was doing that because otherwise I would have had nothing, right?
Hmm.
To show. And you can see it over time how I have improved versions of systems and they're different systems each time, right? At the start, I've got locomotion, then suddenly I've got a full body. And then after that, I've got a new IK system, which makes a better body. And then after that, I've got a different form of locomotion that improves my previous locomotion. So there's just these different ideas that I get. One thing I have a habit of doing, which is both good and also clearly bad in terms of me, making something production worthy, is that if I have any idea throughout my day, I will immediately want to implement that and try it. And not implement it in one of my existing projects or anything. I will try out an idea whenever I have it. Um, Going back to a little bit of a detail about me, I have an unusual. It's not really I would say, diagnosed problem, but I can
ADHD?
tell you right now, no, I don't know anything about any of those things. I'm just saying straight up, I have an inability to stop thinking of anything, of any of my work.
Hmm.
It's very related to what I do. And when I say inability, I mean literally throughout trying to sleep, I'm not able to,
Hmm.
right? I constantly design systems even when I'm in bed because I can't stop thinking and I never stop thinking.
Your poor wife.
Yes, she's very aware of this. She's now very aware of this. She says like he literally doesn't sleep. He doesn't sleep
Hmm.
until you'll never see me fall asleep because you'll always be sleeping beforehand.
In terms of the kind of system that would be required to run the baseline of TX, what kind of CPU, what kind of specs would the average consumer be looking at in order to run your software performantly?
Oh, it's not complex in the end. I mean, yeah, it's a bunch of ragdoll stuff, so there's a lot of CPU heavy physics stuff going on. But effectively, it's very similar to all of the other physics games in terms of the amount of performance you need.
Okay.
I test it on Quest 3 right now, and it runs smoothly on there. The demo world that I've got,
72
which has
hertz, yeah?
a bunch of yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I have everything on default for now, but I really want to ramp it up to 90 to get a nicer underlying physics movement. There's a bit of smoothness issues that I want to just clean up entirely.
Using space warp, or is it native?
No, no, no. I don't use any of that.
Good, good.
Natively, it should be running perfectly fine.
Hmm. What is it?
Otherwise, I would usually notice if there's been going on.
Hmm. Do you, and I can guess the answer to this one, but I want to ask it anyway. Do you have a deadline set for when you really want to start getting some productions out there and see your work be put to use?
So originally, I would have said just straight up no, but well, I would have hesitated to say it, but that would be the truth. But now I'm looking to try and get a demo out within a month or two, or possibly even weeks. I really want to push that point for the demo side. I want a little bit of extra funding on the crowd side, possibly. It's just things that I've been talking about a bit as well on the outside, and I would love for a product to be done, or at least something you would see a trailer of with about a year from now.
Hmm.
That's what I'm trying to push for. So it's not a crazy 10 years from now in the future when we're in flying cars that are absolutely never going to happen because the government would never allow you. When we're in space, maybe a Project TX would happen. It's not that. I'm hoping it's not that.
Okay,
the
okay.
best that's the best description actually.
Yeah, well,
Again,
we'll.
demos coming out very, very soon because it's already. I'm building a menu. Menus are the most annoying thing to build because you don't need it, so you never build it, and then everyone else needs it when you release a product. So
What
there we
kind of
go.
menu are you building? Is it going to be like a physical? Is it actually going to incorporate the motion controls, or is it going to be a laser pointer and a floating screen?
I was going to build my standard UI menu that's very lasery,
Mm.
and then when I built my world, a little room, a menu room. Again, I felt the need to walk around it. So I was like, screw this. I'm gonna make it physical,
Good.
right? Because I can't. I, again, there'll be things like settings and those little detail things that you have to have on some level of UI panel. But I'm gonna go as physical as I can in terms of what you need to physically do.
I would ask that with any menus that you do where you have to toggle a slider, could you please make it so that you can reach out and grab like a sort of cube that's on the slider and slide it from left to right rather than use a laser pointer, because that way you can have the fine control of your wrist and forearms and stuff. It just makes sense for VR. I despise having to adjust things with a laser pointer with a trembly motion controller if it isn't filtered.
Yeah, with your wrist,
Yeah, it
with your
sucks.
wrist.
Yeah.
Yes, I would really prefer that. Right now, the way that I get into VR, which used to be just bloody press play and my Rift would do it. Unfortunately, my Rift CV1 is now too old and is difficult to use because it's got a broken strap and I haven't fixed it and this and that. So now with the Quest 3, I never pick up the controllers until I've actually loaded up my game. And even after that, I first kind of walk around whenever I'm first testing my game for the day. I'll walk around with hand tracking only first, just because it feels nice. And all of that is done without any of those laser pointers.
Hmm.
So when I start up my Quest 3, I reach out, push the link button, after I've cabled it up, and then I get very annoyed because in order to reach the little flipping room calibration button, which moves with your face and it moves positionally as well. So if you step forward to push it,
Yeah, I
it
understand.
moves away from you.
Yeah.
You have to kind of lean your head back, while reaching your hand out, but you can physically push the button. But yeah, I never use the laser even for that. I would use the laser only when I'm holding controllers.
Oh, okay. I played a game that was I was given a private beta code after my recent physics video. It's a really
I think I saw
basic.
that video today.
Oh, you actually saw the stream,
For
did
the
you?
screen factor.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. The control scheme that they worked out there, where you push your hand forward and back, and it extends out the cursor, is really really good. Um, yeah, yeah. It's
That's a nice idea. That's a
yeah,
nice idea.
it's a nice idea.
But in my case, you could just switch to a dude with the long arms.
True, true. Yeah, there are many ways to deal with it. So I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to express myself, but I'm also going to assume that I'm speaking for a significant portion of the normie audience. Is that I haven't looked at your videos for a while, and I've watched a good portion of them. But the reason being that I won't revisit them is because they piss me off. And they piss me off because what you are doing and what you seemingly have done is really good, really exciting stuff. And it's been many years, and I'm very impatient. And I am, as a user, as a general enthusiast of VR, extremely keen to experience these things, to see them put into a meaningful context. And that's another area that has me a little bit worried also, is that you may have gone ahead and built a very, very, very good system. But as I said in my most recent video, it will, I believe, still generally be for naught. And in fact, I believe it can still be successful even if put into a similar kind of a pseudo sandbox esque context like Bone Labs was. But I think in terms of really
Just
capturing
make a
attention.
correction there.
Sorry?
There's no S on the end.
Uh, yeah, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be charitable because there is a law, there is a story, there is some semblance of more going on there a bit. So I'm trying to be nice.
No,
But
no,
yeah.
I meant bone lab. The spelling.
Oh, did I get it wrong?
There's no S on the end.
Yeah, I keep doing that actually. I don't know why I keep saying it as plural. It's like a tick with me. I don't know. So yes, Bone Lab. Thank you for the correction.
No.
But yeah. I mean, your system is great, but it's not going to get where we would hope for it to be and impress as we know it could impress if it isn't put into a meaningful context with an actual good game behind it. So, would you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, it's absolutely necessary, right? It's again, I learned a little bit about the business side. I learned the psychology elements over the past few years. I studied people as they behave,
Uh,
and got all of the same comment trouble that you've had. But yeah, no, it's absolutely necessary that it go into something. And I'm angry at me. If anyone's to be angry, it is me. Because for as much as you've seen the YouTube videos, I've played it. And then I've played everything else. And it's like, holy crap, why have you not put this out, dude?
right,
You
yeah,
know, I'm
yeah.
I'm more angry than you feel right now. And you should be angry. I should be angry. It's upsetting that I never managed to do it before, but I really want to push that now. I have a lot more understanding. It's a completely different person in terms of how to handle things now. And I have actually better connections industry wise now to be able to speak to people to get things done, or even take some learning from other people, right?
Hmm.
To get things done. Especially since I mean my boss is literally Shane from SideQuest, right? Right now I work at SideQuest. In the past, obviously, I worked at Ubisoft, so I've got a few people who I've actually spoken to about how to design certain things and things like that. I have a better situation now and a proper understanding of why some games went far, why other games didn't get out there, even though I think they should have made it. You know, I have a better understanding. So while it's not entirely a complete resolution to the feelings that people have, also recognize that if it weren't for YouTube, you simply wouldn't even know it exists and
Of
you wouldn't be
course,
so angry.
of
So
course.
it feels it's a weird, yeah, it's a weird situation though, isn't it? You feel upset because you know it exists and it could just be done. But if you didn't know it exists, you wouldn't even have had the pleasure of knowing there's some possible way of doing things that way.
Ignorance is bliss.
And man, it's what upsets me more is being able to play with it, right? You mentioned in a video, I
Listen
think
to
today,
you. Oh, I get to play with my fantastic toy. It upsets me so
well,
much.
sorry to say
Oh,
it, but
man.
I'll tell you something, right? Because it links again to something you said in what video? God damn it, what video was it? It's probably like 7 months ago or
No, I
something, and
probably
I
forgot
think,
as well. No worries.
but yeah, you mentioned how. Oh, I've got my mouse up. There we go. You mentioned something about this where it's the physicality one, the one where you were throwing the gun up and down in hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand
Oh,
grenades.
yeah, yeah. The secret behind VR games, I think I called it.
Secret
Yeah.
behind VR.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how such a tiny little, not even the point of the game thing, keeps you entertained and makes you feel some sense of just rewardingness.
Just like in real
And that's
life. Yeah.
exactly what happens every time, every day when I start up this thing to work on it, right? I don't deal with any of the things I'm currently working on. Like I mentioned earlier, I go in hand cracking only, right? Which is already feeling good. I hit the little menu button on my hand, which activates my exploration mode, locomotion. So I can walk around using that. It directs basically from the center of your room outwards is the direction you want to go, and then it just uses my regular locomotion. So I can control the speed and and the direction. And I go straight to the table that has all of my melee weapons on and pick up the sledgehammer. And every time you pick up that thing, you just feel something different because the weighting is nice and it doesn't wibble wobble. There's no swinging on it. It swings around your arm like it's supposed to instead of around your wrist or around the palm of your hand. It, I know it's so sad that I'm telling you this and you can't even try
I
it,
was going to
but
say it's time to share,
right,
Mr. Nimso.
I'm gonna put it out. I'm gonna put it out very soon, but it's just that. It's exactly what you're saying, and it upsets me that I haven't put it out. You know, I got to put it out there. You recognize the distinct difference between a linear force holding a hand up in space and a structured hand that is being held up by a wrist, by a forearm, by an upper arm, by a shoulder, by a chest, by a spine, and a hip. And it is actually doing that because
Yeah.
all of the collisions are only the ragdoll. There's no capsule collider going on. There's no fakery. Like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing fake.
Well, I'm
It's just
looking
it's
forward to
just done.
experiencing it in the very near future. And I want to clarify as well. I mean, as much as it is a bit frustrating seeing this wonderful toy that only you can play with, and you've been teasing us for years, I think it's actually more a grievance with the industry as a whole, with just how many disappointments there have been, at least from my perspective, and just how many lackluster, mediocre, drops the ball in key ways experiences that we keep on getting over and over and over again, which makes the teasing done on your end even more agonizing to a point when seeing what can be done. So it isn't necessarily just at you. If there were more, if there were generally more better things going on with the industry, more interesting things, more fulfilling experiences, then there wouldn't be as much frustration or impatience with waiting to see your project. But I suppose in a way it can be a good thing, because that encouragement of a lot of it leaning on you can be a good kick up the arse, and hopefully it can cause a stir or revitalize things or whatever, you know. So I wanted to clarify that it's more of an industry thing where the frustration comes from, and not really actually at yourself and your lack of sharing. A little bit, a little.
No, I get it. I get
Yeah,
it. I get it. But in the end, you know, it's the reality of business. It's the reality of ecosystems. Um, it's not that the best wins. It's
of
that
course.
the one who succeeds in the economy wins,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So either I'm gonna be left behind with the best what I feel is the best system, or I better I better kick myself in the ass, right?
It's a very
You know,
mature outlook, very wise, very mature. Yeah, good.
I mean, phew, there was other subjects that I wanted to touch upon before, man, which was like the accessibility one. You discussed it
Yeah,
already.
yeah. You never
You
mentioned
discussed
the
it
the the
already,
thing.
and
Yeah, go on.
yeah, it was about because I saw one of your videos where you were talking about it was even a quote in the title, which is what's the blooming quote? If your VR game is accessible for everyone, it benefits everyone.
Yeah,
Brackets or get sued.
yeah.
And man, you just touched upon something that really irritated me because oh man, okay, so when I was working at God, I gotta try and be super careful now. I can't say things like that.
I'll try and say them
Um,
for you.
okay, yeah. Um, Accessibility is the subject right now, right? Accessibility is something that can be achieved in what I would say is kind of two focuses, two ideals. One is is a focus on achieving uh what they would call, man, I have to be super careful. This is politics. What they would call inclusion,
Hmm.
and the other is truly building systems that are designed to allow people who may not have been able to play the product as it is,
Hmm.
right? On one hand, to play the product as it is, which means you don't change the product at all, right? The product stays exactly as is. Those that can play it without any accessibility features can play it perfectly the same. And it is unimpacted by those that will play it with accessibility features, right? On the other side of it, it's what I would call either politically or ideologically motivated. But let's just say for a moment, it is claiming that there is a moral responsibility, and I think you touched upon this on your video,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you said, "But what about these people? But what about those people?" And you said, "I don't have to build for them," right? And I want to give a really nice example of this. There's another YouTuber that I'd seen. They played a little game, and this game was made, I believe, by a grandfather specifically for his grandchildren. Now, who do you think the target audience is of that product?
It depends on the age of his grandchildren.
Well, no, but the target audience is only those children. It's not even the age group. It's just them.
Right, right.
Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just for those kids in particular. It's not
Right.
for an old. Yeah, 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 of course. But yeah, I was
So
clarifying if they were old or young
oh,
grandchildren.
right. Yeah. Sorry.
Mm,
Well, I mean, my question was a bit ubiquitous
mm.
in that manner. But yes. So in that scenario, given that scenario, if I was to say a grandfather made a product specifically for his grandchildren, a game for his grandchildren to play, if I said that to my parents, they would say, "Oh wow, that's so nice." But there are other people in the world who would say, if you made a product for one specific group, that why don't you make it for other groups?
Mm.
Why don't you make it for everybody else? And you just wouldn't say that if you were put into that context where the grandfather made it for his grandchildren, right?
Right,
That's
right.
because you do not have a moral responsibility to include anyone, right?
Hmm.
The very conceptual idea of what they label inclusiveness, and this is me putting myself in a very risky position saying this, is wrong and inappropriate.
And it's
Nobody
insidious
has
too.
it. Oh, I have to avoid saying things like that. But it is true what you're saying. But yes, it is not a moral responsibility for you to include anyone. If anything, that game made for his grandchildren, which are probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 grandchildren, maybe they're less. is probably one of the most exclusive products you could possibly build. It's literally designed for 3 or 4 people, compared to the millions in the industry, right, who might play the game. So it's when it comes to moral responsibility, you have some moral responsibility, and that's to your target audience. If you're building a game for your grandchildren who are maybe 4 or 5 years old, you have a responsibility for that game to be appropriate for 4 or 5 year old children. That's your only moral responsibility. You don't have a responsibility to include anyone else. There has never been any reason for that. There has never been a responsibility for that.
Completely
And
agree.
I say this because it really angered me when working at a large company whose name I've mentioned, but I won't say in this context,
Mhm.
maybe if it gets clipped, because that's exactly how those types of companies focus on accessibility. They don't. They don't care about whether the product is accessible to people as is. What they instead do is they have this ideal that they're trying to target and a virtuousness surrounding it.
Yes, virtue
And that's just
signaling.
not
Yeah,
how you build accessibility.
yeah.
And we can look at my previous example of accessibility, not previous, but the one where I actually described my version, which was it's an accident, right? It's accidental innovation as opposed to intentional, where you can build better accessibility when you happen to have knowledge in a certain area and you happen to have some experience in a certain area and you just put things together to build something new, and it happens to be an improvement to accessibility, right? Which was
Mm.
my locomotion system, for example. If you set out only to focus on improved accessibility, you don't know what you're doing. You don't have knowledge in any specific area. You're not looking at any specific problems. You're not going to manage to do that. It's all just a virtuousness, it's all just a
Yes.
label. Whereas you take someone, I'll give an example. Someone who showed up on Dragon's Den once, and I believe he was a farmer, and he happened to have some engineering knowledge, so he built a new product to help with farming. He didn't build that because he's an inventor. He built that because he has knowledge of farming and knowledge of engineering, and he had a specific problem, which he knows because he was a farmer, and he put things together to solve a problem. If you address a specific problem, then you might be able to actually fix that. But if you start addressing it as a whole, as a concept, as some sort of ethos, you ain't going nowhere, mate. Sorry, I had to go into a layman's terms way of saying things there. But yeah, you ain't going nowhere.
Completely agree. I'm sure you'll be unsurprised to hear. Completely agree. And I would
Oh,
go
yeah.
further and say that these virtue signaling entities, people, whatever, they are using the idea of virtue. They are hijacking the notion of inclusion and accessibility solely for their own selfish desire to win social brownie points and conform to a certain ideology that they like in order to selfishly bolster themselves up in the eyes of others and feel like they are superior and better, and the kind of motivations that underpin those things would point toward a personality that is not very nice or desirable. Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, whether they are misguided or not, the ramifications are clear to see, and, well, they are apparently clear to see for some. But yeah, there are a lot more harsh things I can say, but I think that you've also put it very, very well in perhaps a more palatable manner than I otherwise would have, so completely agree with you.
Oh, believe me, I like to use certain words outside of public knowledge. I'm joking.
I'm sure
Oh,
you
well, I'm not
would.
joking. But yeah, I can be loud about stuff. I just learned how to correctly speak.
Well, I'm
Um,
really sorry, go on.
Depending on those things. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm really happy that you have this perspective, and that gives me more confidence on your project and what it can and likely will achieve when it does go into more of the public hands. That you're not going to be crippled and ideologically captured or self-interested in posturing, in social posturing and virtue signaling at the cost of the creative product that you're making. Because I think that we can see many demonstrations of the consequences of that ideology being a primary in our entertainment media, in how that media not only just does not resonate with a general majority of an audience, but it just is downright crap and low quality for the most part. Now, there are exceptions, of course. I do want to
Great.
be nuanced. There are definitely exceptions, and there are still some very good things, elements that can come from it, as with any art, depending on one's perspective. But yes, yeah, I'm not a fan either, and I'm happy to hear that you are the way that you are there, and I'm sure that many viewers will be too, or listeners. But there'll be
I,
some who you will now lose, but
uh,
that's the price that we pay.
I, it's a necessary thing, you know.
It's just common sense, man. I mean,
It's
like,
necessary to recognize when things are not focused on what they claim to be,
yeah,
you
exactly.
know. And again, like I said, I worked at a big tech company that unfortunately has whose share price has seen the results of not being so genuine in that area.
And much deserved.
That's the best way to describe it. Take that maybe as a warning if you are someone who's a developer or even working in any industry. Please, for the love of God, let's just focus on the bloody product.
Yeah, just make a
Um,
good product. Throw the ideology out the window. Just make a genuinely good product, like, as we used to, right?
and going back to the accessibility, make it accessible. Don't try and think you have a responsibility to do so, though. It is if you can improve a product, improve it. But if you can't, you don't have a responsibility to do so.
Hmm.
You don't. It's just not. It's not necessary. You know. Man, there's probably a million other subjects to go into. If you have anything you want to, I'm still free.
Did want to ask briefly, this particular big tech company that you have experience with, how long were you there for, and did you get any decent things of value from it in terms of increasing your skills, and just how was the experience, all in all, being there, just as a bit of insight, if you can offer it?
Oh, I mean, see, on that front, it's really good. It's all really good.
Okay.
One of the things about these bigger companies, I was there for 3 years. I started in December 2019 and left February 23, I think. Yeah, and it was a very good experience. On the one hand, the people are great to each other. And in some areas you're probably forced to be, but
Right,
the
yeah.
people can be really, really, really good. They're respectful of you, and they work quite well with you, right? On that one hand, on that side of things, the workplace you end up with when they're such big companies, that the workplace you end up with is beautiful. It's very pleasant. But I had a name for it. I called it the comfort trap.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and this is you'll see this in tech company adverts when they're trying to recruit. When you see all of these TikTok stars, well, not stars, but TikTok type videos where they're saying, "Ooh, I go into work and then I eat this and then I relax and I do about a 1 hour of work and then I do this and I relax in the spa."
Yeah.
There's actually an element of that. There's actually some truth to it, even though they're probably hamming it up. There is a comfort trap. This workplace has a better living space than you have in your small apartment. It has a better garden than you don't have at your apartment. It has better facilities. It has a better bathroom. It has nicer showers than I had at my apartment. It has better everything. And you have all of your workplace there. And, they accommodate for you if you need to stay there as well.
Is the pay okay?
Um, Sorry?
Is the pay okay?
The pay, the pay, I don't know much about it, right? In the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
I know what I was getting paid. There was a day when I was speaking to the artist just after work. We were chilling. We were chilling. We were chilling
Chilling with your
in
homies.
at the picnic table in the garden.
Hmm.
Yeah, see that gives you an idea of the comfort trap. And one of them wanted to go out to eat. The other one said, "I can't. I'm broke." So I responded saying, "Uh, you guys work here. What do you mean you're broke?" And they said, "You're a programmer, right?" I was actually hired as a junior programmer. They said, "No, I'm an artist," and that explains it.
Okay.
So their wage to them was just too low. And on what I'm on currently, I would say yes, I understand. It is actually quite low, especially when you look at the adverts that are available for companies that are much bigger, like Meta, and you look at the wages that they're offering, and it makes you quite shocked. So, it's a good I again, for some types of people, it's the right place to be, right? And you've probably heard this from, probably I think business gurus or something like that, where they'd say for some people the employment world is the right place, right? And for me, it's a nice place temporarily, but it's not the final spot. Um, there's a lot of people who wouldn't be able to handle life as an independent entirely, right? Like you said, once you go completely independent, you kind of have to have a lot more discipline on yourself.
Yeah, you really
And you
do.
can imagine if someone handles their work life quite emotionally,
Mm.
which tends to be the case everywhere you go nowadays,
Mm.
then you might have an issue where that person wouldn't be able to do that, right? So for some people, the comfort trap is perfect. But for me, I can visualize it as they keep you here and you're effectively stuck because it is so pleasant and the wage is good enough. It's good enough. It's a pleasant place, but it's a comfort trap,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It stops you from seeing so much more that you could be.
I think that's very well said. To be comfortable is synonymous with complacency also. So if you're someone who wishes to grow, then being comfortable is not necessarily where you want to be if you want to keep on learning and growing. And that's very insightful. And I'm kind of not surprised to hear that because you hear rumors about those places, but it is interesting to hear a little bit about what it actually is like.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot more that made me annoyed, but those are the nice things that I've
Sure,
said,
sure.
right? I've said the nice things. The annoying things are we've already mentioned the word ideology.
Hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it goes without saying. We all know plenty about that already. There is one thing that you mentioned in the comment that you left on the other interview video that I wanted to call you on now. You said that you'd like to have a chat because you wanted to give a bit more hope about what full physics could actually be like and the steps beyond the lacking NPCs and unchallenging game mechanics. We've already touched a little bit on that, but I'm curious about the hope that you wished to impart in that respect, and I'm guessing it's in relation to your project.
Oh yeah. Okay, so your one of your bigger complaints in a way is the complete lack of capability that ragdolls can perform, right? That NPCs in general can perform, whether they're ragdolls or not, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, they're just utterly
Yeah,
brain dead, basically,
the
and a
NPC,
complete
yeah.
non-threat and just nonsense. Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Euphoria and ragdolls that once you step into full ragdoll, it becomes a lot more difficult to even get them to do the basic stuff that you found so easy when you were animating and just sliding your characters around with an invisible capsule. My focus when building NPCs, and I'm just focusing on only that right now, just in terms of discussion, but even in all the other areas, and I can actually before we well, no, I'll go into NPCs first. Um, with NPCs was as in terms of what they function as full ragdolls. That gives you all of that little bit of flexibility that when you touch them, they interact immediately properly, right? In the way that you get from Boneworks, Bone Lab, whatever. But at the same time, they are developed in a way that the absolute baseline requirement this was that I put in there as I was working, that you can work with them as a developer in the same way you worked with an animated character, a regular non-ragdoll, right? So they are fully capable, and the way that I did that is actually pretty simple, conceptually at least. They are exactly the same thing as the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
The player is a full ragdoll character control system that is actual ragdoll. There's no fakery going on. Obviously, they're being stood up by some element of forces. There's that is the only fakery going on. But beyond that, they are exactly the same thing as the NPC ragdolls, right? Now, I'll touch upon something like sword fighting. When it went through back in the day when I first did active ragdoll as a VR system, my video was called "I finally did it," right, where I put a full ragdoll instead of just physics hands. And in that, to test it, I attached a sword. I I attached a sword to. Don't you just love the studio? I attached a sword to the player's hand. Um, it wasn't grabbable or anything. It was just attached constantly. And I could go around and I created a little simple stabbing system just so that I could pick physics objects up to showcase that it was physics, right? And I built a little fake NPC, which was a ragdoll. Again, the exact same thing as the player ragdoll. And it had a shield in one hand and a sword in the other. And my natural logic said the very obvious way to handle them responding to me would be to have their sword attempting to constantly attack, right? While their shield aims directly at my blade.
Okay,
How
yeah.
many games have you seen doing that? To me, it was the most obvious shit ever.
Yeah.
Pardon my language. But I only recently saw an update to a game, one of the combat games, one of the, I think, Battle? No, not Battle Talent. Swordsman, which was talking about their next gen fighting combat system.
Next
And they
gen.
talked about how they, I think that was a within the past year, how they now have NPCs that target your hand as you move your hand, you know? And to me, it was so obvious. I was like, oh, yeah, Blade and Sorcery. This is a new game coming out. This is a new sword game to me. I'm sure they'll be doing that. To me, some things are just obvious
Yeah.
and they didn't want to do them. So maybe they didn't want to, maybe people didn't realize. Oh God, I feel like I'm insulting. Like I'm so pompous sometimes. But bloody hell is it obvious to me sometimes. I know I sound pompous, but bloody hell, it's just obvious. And the same thing applies to NPCs. There's so much you could have done. Like I'll give you, God, I don't want to insult you guys here, but I'll jump into something like Boneworks. Why is it that your NPCs have 3 attack animations? Like, are you telling me you didn't bother to animate a few more? Are you telling me you didn't want your NPCs to just move sideways whenever the player is attempting to attack them? Move sideways. Keep a certain distance from the player. You know where the position of the player is. Just move the character away. Like there are tiny little simple things you can add to basic AI to make them not even as good as the classic games, but just make logical sense in the way that you would respond to things. So, for example, for mine, um, when an NPC sees you, they can detect obviously the player system, right? That player system knows what it's grabbing. Those grabbed objects, um, using my kind of sandbox physics systems under the hood and data structures, they already have a pre-calculated volume. So you know actually how far the object extends from the player's hand, which means you can explicitly target that in terms of your either attack or defense. If your NPC is standing there and I'm holding no weapon, they can get a certain distance, which is my arm length, and they can actually read that data. It's provided to them through the systems, right? So they can keep a certain defensive distance, which is your arm length. As soon as you take out a weapon that extends your hand, they can keep a slight extra distance because they know how large that object is, and they know how far it would be able to reach them. It's such a tiny little thing, but that in itself would immediately make you see that, oh, these guys are actually thinking. They're actually responding
Mm-hmm.
to something. And that, I don't want to spoil the other details that I have in my brain, but I have millions of these little ideas, you know? Things like that. I think you're making a combat focused game. Why is that not the thing you're looking at? What would a human do in that scenario? And again, it goes back to what you said earlier, which is the way that I'm doing things is I look at the real world version and then I try to look at the nuances and replicate them. And I'm really hoping that that gives people an understanding that there is a million more things we can do with the same tech, with the same setups, the same software. Wow, my lip sync has delayed so much. But that's what happens when we run for a few hours. Sorry, complete sidetrack. But yeah, there is a lot more we can do. Sorry, you probably have an opinion on this. Go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's very refreshing to hear someone in your position say these things. And you said you were at the risk of sounding pompous. And, well, with someone of my accent and my way of speaking, I'm sure that I'm already labelled as such by many. But I just completely agree. The things that you say about, particularly one thing that grinds my gears with VR melee games is the enemies just getting in your face all the time. And many times during a live stream, I will almost cry out, well, in anger, just like, why is it? Why is he in my face? Like it's not even optimal or smart for the NPC to do that, so they can attack me. And the things that you mention, like why hasn't this been done, like for me, it's super dead obvious common sense as well. Just look at how we behave in real life in a general manner. And but this is where I lack the confidence and conviction to really press on these things because I don't know what goes on under the hood. I don't know all of the calculations and the systems and what they are capable of and what we generally can do in today's age versus before, even though I've seen results that are perceptively better. Perhaps the systems involved are not as easy to do or as common as I thought they were. And so, yeah, this is where me being a user, a layman, bites me in the arse and takes away my confidence to really drill down on these points. But to hear you say these things with your expertise and your knowledge, and for you to complain in the same way, this stuff is really obvious, you have all the data, that's a very vindicating and gratifying thing for me to hear. It's very lovely.
I'm both glad and also annoyed that it's true. You know, but
You and
again,
me
I think
both.
to explain it, I think it goes back to what I'd said earlier about fidelity and quality. Back in the day, the fidelity they had was so limited, and they had to push the hell out of the hardware and software limitations they had to make something function a way that they had to think. So the logic that they had to go through to make things happen is just, it required so much more effort, mental effort, which you just don't have to do now. Which is why, a lot of people complain when indies use engines like Unreal, for example, where they say it's got that Unreal Engine look. And the reason for that is, without learning what each of the post processing things are or do, people jump in and turn the values up to maximum. And there's something that I call ambient occlusion overdose, which you'll see in so many Unreal games, small time, indie, new dev Unreal games, where they provided you with such advanced fidelity and high resolution, high quality effects, that when someone stepping in who hasn't bothered to really learn that stuff, or hasn't had the chance to, steps in and has access to that, they just start making a bit of a mess. And unfortunately, because people, I don't want people to push back, but people don't truly push back on it. As much as they complain, they don't push back on it. You don't need to learn. You don't need to learn. I'll give the example on the fidelity side from the old days. I'll give the example of a channel called Game Hut, or his other channel, which was Coding Secrets. This is a guy who, these are YouTube channels, by the way. This is a guy who was working, or I think still works, with Traveler's Tales, right? Traveler's Tales, a classic company that were game development. And they were making games back in the Mega Drive days. And he explained how he managed in Sonic 3D Blast to make an FMV sequence on a Mega Drive, which was unbelievably difficult, right? It just wasn't capable of it. The hardware just wasn't capable of it. And he showed how he did it, making single frame images turn into 3 frames of video by using each channel separately. It was just absurd. And one of the coolest things that I recognized from what he was doing, there was one game on the Mega Drive where where they built a hand. It's like a little jelly bean sized character, a jelly bean like character, and it's got 2 floating hands like this, right? So think this right now, my head with hands floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And as the hand pushed on something, it pushed the character back. Now that should tell you about something, because what they had inevitably developed back then in a game that just didn't become popular, they had developed what is the equivalent of VR physics-based body systems in 2D on a Mega Drive. And that tells you how far you can push tech. So what I do, like I said earlier, I don't have ragdoll fingers on my character yet. And that's because I'd rather push the absolute limits with that fidelity and then step in to a better version later.
Yeah.
Right? You have to do that with everything. When you're dealing with NPCs, when it comes to NPCs, I learned a little bit from Grand Theft Auto. From modding Grand Theft Auto, I learned something, and you'll see there's a resonance to this. It's very similar to the way I build now, which is that the player is attached to a camera, under the hood. I'm not talking physically attached. The player is a distinct thing from the camera, which is the viewpoint, which both of these are a distinct thing from the character you move around the world. That character is what GTA labels as a pedestrian. Every single NPC, every single character in the world, including the animals, are all pedestrians. In terms of functional capability, every single character in the game world can do exactly what the player character can do, and the player can be attached to any one of them and move any of them. So that's
Okay.
exactly how I build my systems.
That sounds good.
That is how you have a consistent world that just feels right.
Where
But
can I
again,
sign up, Mr. Nimso?
you have to write some AI for that. And I don't mean modern world machine learning AI. I'm talking good old fashioned games.
Well, you have done an
You
excellent
gotta
job
throw
of
away all the bullshit you've learned in the modern world. Just throw it away.
you've done an excellent job of selling it even more, and I don't know whether to be even more frustrated or excited or looking forward to eventually seeing the results of TX, and I can only hope again that it is sooner rather than later that we can get to enjoy these things, because at least based upon this conversation, and this is the first time I've ever spoken to you, for any viewers, listeners, this is the first time that we've ever interacted via voice. So it's a new experience for me also, based upon how you've presented yourself. I very much am in alignment and interested with your philosophies, your experience, and your general outlook on gaming, the industry, and how to do things. And yeah, I think that you and I could chat for a very long time, and I think that we'd find a lot in common with how we view things, for sure, for sure. But I'm glad that someone like you exists and are doing what they're doing. But I just want to try your stuff. God damn it!
I know. It's again, I told you. Don't worry, I'm angry for you. I'm angry at myself that you ain't got to play it. You know, everyone else has become multimillionaires. What the hell am I doing?
Yeah, I know, right? I know. Money.
It's not even me complaining. I'm just angry at myself.
Yeah. I feel a similar
Yeah,
way about my
back
content,
my head into
actually.
a wall, dude. I'm talking to myself there, by the way. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, no, I was gonna finish up and go full circle on what you said about how the limit. It's a typical human thing, isn't it? I'm sure that you've noticed that we humans tend to be at our best and our most creative and our most innovative when we are limited, when resources are low, when we have to really optimize this stuff. Are you writing something on the table?
No. When I move my mouse, that is the animator jumps over to this when I move my mouse.
Ah,
This is the top right corner, top left, bottom left, bottom right. I don't know if it's mirrored in the video that's coming through on Discord,
I see.
but it might be. Is this my right hand?
Yes,
Right, so that's correct then. So what I see is mirrored on Discord, but it's correct on your end.
I see. Yeah.
But yeah, so when I move the mouse, it jumps to that, and you can see that I haven't fixed the animation. So my hand tracked animation stays when I move my mouse.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's exactly what was happening over here, where when I move my mouse, it points the remote in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are all just little ideas that I had when building it, and the reason being, I was about to do this. So remember, everybody, to switch the green screen on before you press the button to check out VR Boys.
Oh man, the cringe. Spare me, spare me. This is about you. It's not about me. But I wanted to finish
In that case, there we go. Sorry.
There we go. Yeah, visit Nimso. Visit Nimso. Kick him up the arse. Leave lots of comments on his video saying release the project now. Stop getting lost in your work. Get it out, get it out, get it out. Talk to more investors and, yeah, kick him up the arse all the time, every day to remind him so that we can all enjoy the fruits of his labor. And hopefully, ideally, you can be rewarded for that too. And you can be the millionaire. You can be rich for all of your years of effort so long as it's put into the right hands, right?
Aye. The right hand is having a little bit of functional trouble right now. I have to keep lifting it twice to make it activate. For some reason, my leap motion thinks I've got three hands, and of course, hand number three just doesn't do anything in game.
Okay.
But yeah, this is.
Hmm.
I've got more work to do on my studio.
Well, it
But
looks very fancy and shiny and impressive, regardless. Hmm. But yeah,
that's the real time, by the way. That
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's the real time. So just a heads up.
How long did it take you to make that scene?
This it was multiple iterations again, but I think you can see on the YouTube channel. Yeah, see, I'm not going to give you the answers. You'd have to check that channel.
Ooh.
But yeah, you can see how the development went because it started off as just a literal sphere with no lip syncing and just hand tracking. And because there was no other details, your brain did all the work, and it just looked great,
Hmm.
right? Because your brain does all the work and it makes it look really real. I didn't have to do any work. So it's just there's actually some clever work going under the hood. It's not just head tracking my head.
Hmm.
Because the webcam is very limited in what you can see, I actually amplify the rotations. So when I do a 90-degree turn on the video, I'm actually only doing 45 in the real world.
I see.
So, and that's why it looks a little bit more active. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
It's a
There's a lot going
logical,
on.
clever thing to do, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything before we leave that I've missed. I'm trying to think from a viewer's perspective, not necessarily just from my own. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, or insight that they would be interested in? Nothing comes to mind. I think we've been fairly comprehensive. We've heard about you, a bit of your history. We've heard about TX. Do you feel that there's anything about TX that hasn't been covered, or you'd like to say anything about the project to hype it up, to big it up, or that we haven't already?
Not really. I mean, I've been currently working on stabby systems.
On what? On
There's some
stabby
cool
systems.
stabby systems. There's some
Ah,
cool crap going on there. Basically, in one video, I described physical properties where I attached to the physical materials, the friction material that the physics engine uses for all of the surfaces. I attached extra data to that. So things like density can be detected when you do anything with an object that collides.
why would you need to do
Um,
that?
for my stabby system and
Ah,
for other advanced systems. So things like buoyancy use that. But yeah, for my stabbing system, nothing is specified as stabbable. You can literally stab anything provided you have enough strength. So it uses the density of the surface, and now it also checks for the actual thickness of the surface, and the width of the blade affects it as well. And you can feel this in game. So as you go deeper into a surface, as you stab something, you can feel the increase in force, and you can feel the increase in force depending on the shape of your blade as well. At the same time, it's all based on the density of the object. So if you play as a normal character, you can, take a pickaxe and maybe just about poke it into some soft materials, maybe just a little bit of a hard material like wood or a little bit of a soft rock. But if you increase your muscle strength by 10 times, you can stab it into metal. But you can't do that without. And it's anything. Nothing has a dedicated data set that tells you can stab in. Every single thing that's a collision can be stabbed into.
and
Every
is
single thing.
and is that computationally more expensive?
Not at all. I mean, it's a tiny little on collision. You multiply the density by a value and check whether your force has gone over. Yeah, it's so tiny, but it's all about ideas and structure and the underlying layout of your code and hierarchies.
I see.
That's where the complexity lies. That's why it becomes difficult to work with. When you look at the structure of the characters for Project TX, it's so overcomplicated, but in practice, it's so much simpler than it has been in the past. And I can give the example. A lot of games use, for example, the Hexabody system by Cloudwalk Studio, which is available on Asset Store. I just did some advertisement there for effectively a competitor, but don't worry, it's fine.
Competition's good.
Um, and when you look at the code, it's all written in a single file. It's like 1,000, 2,000 lines of code in one file. That becomes very, very difficult to handle when you're trying to make modifications
Hmm.
or when you're just trying to build a structure and expand on it. My kind of logic evolved over time and actually improved when I worked at Ubisoft as well. I learned a little bit more about coding, and I have a much better structure now where I've separated every little element, all of those things like locomotion and handling physics, handling hand tracking, handling my input simulation. All of that is in separate little modules, and it speeds up the work process a little bit. It makes it much more easy to explain to yourself when you've left it for a week and you come back to it. And it's so much easy to expand as well. So even my leg system, for example, procedural leg system, it's written to perform the walk and run animation stuff, which is all procedural. But then to get it to move in a way that it's supposed to when you swim, I added a little add-on system where it overrides that data and goes through each of its add-ons to perform all of their functions. So I can now attach a swimming leg system to my existing leg system, and those are separate modules.
Okay. So it's very
It's a
modular,
it's a it's a matter
basically.
of yeah, it's a matter of layout and code modularity.
Is performance a thing for you too? Have you made this all to be reasonably performant? Because, and I ask this because I think that optimization and performance in the modern day is absolutely in the toilet, and that it's just abysmal. So, and yeah, the performance of our present software absolutely sucks for gaming, and it seems to be getting worse and worse. So, is that something on your mind? Performance?
Yes. Obviously there's a certain good practice, which is that you don't always micro optimize your stuff as you work.
Sure.
But it's also good practice to make sure that what you're writing has some level of optimization.
Mm.
And I'd like to also say that, I try not to go crazy with the effects and shadows and everything, just because I can show it off. I am very one of the things that you have to learn to do is always build to your target platform.
Mm.
So lucky for me, we have a very popular platform with the Quest 3 and the Quest 2 even, which don't have changing hardware. So I have a nice, powerful computer, but I can test on there because I know everyone's going to play on there. So that's really that's really a good thing. So as long as I keep building to the platform, I know how smooth it runs, and I try and optimize for that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, that is one of the advantages of having a closed platform for sure. Okay, and was there anything else about TX that you wanted to cover or mention, or anything that you wanted to get out there that I haven't asked or covered?
Um, I mean, one thing that people have been somewhat confused about is what what is it? Is it a sandbox or a game or something?
Good question.
It's a game. It's in I intend to build a game, but the systems underlying it, all of these physics things and locomotion and all of that, that's all going to be an engine. Well, I call it an engine. It all sits on Unity right now, but it should be expandable beyond there. And my intent is to eventually license that once I've got one game out of my own. So, and I'm not talking about putting it out there for everyone to use no matter what. I'm talking about I want to have some specific rules in terms of who I would like to license things to, and there has to be some level of innovation that you're trying to put forward, where
Great.
these systems will be useful to actually put something new out, rather than just ending up with everyone licenses it, everyone's got the same sandbox out,
Yeah,
and everyone gets fed up of sandboxes,
yeah.
and then that also puts us in disrepute as well.
I'm very
Um,
happy to hear
so
that. Very wise.
so yeah, that's the engine side, that's the licensing of it. And on the game side, I intend to make an actual game. Um, it is not entirely sandbox, but of course it has the nature of sandbox. But there will be a large amount of segments of it that are completely linear in terms of going from A to B. There's a cool idea for that. I have a
Yeah.
cool idea.
Just
But
put
yeah,
some
so you'll
interesting
get the
gameplay in there,
technical
man. That's it. I mean, it's like, yeah, you can
you'll
have the
get
cool
the
systems. Just put some good gameplay in there, some interesting gameplay that takes advantage of VR a bit. That's all you have to do. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that I absolutely love, is games like Human Fall Flat, where you got this simplistic physics thing, but it's all about building a really nice environment for you to use that physics stuff.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
you've got
context.
flexible hands that can hang off things. The number of things you can do with that, you just look at Human Fall Flat and you'll see. There's the inspiration right there.
Did you play the VR version of that?
I have yet to play it, but I know that one thing they mentioned was if we were to do it in first person, it would wobble the player around too much. I have a solution for you guys, but you'll have to
I,
wait till the ending comes out.
yeah, well, once again, I don't understand why there is this hyper fixation on things needing to be first person in VR. I like, why? And I don't understand why there's such an aversion to taking the camera outside of the player. There are platformers in VR. Moss is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you played that. Gorgeous,
I
gorgeous game.
played it, but I love the concept, right?
Oh,
One of the things that I intended to do with all of my little desktop games is that they will all be playable with VR activation. And of course, me being a VR guy, I can implement things that will work properly with the VR tech without just simply having a VR view. So it's possible to do that. But that's for all of my little mini. I've got a lot of things that I've played around with.
I bet
I've
you
done
do.
character controllers in every single area, and I also wrote the character controller under the hood for Assassin's Creed Nexus. But there we go.
I see.
And not the
Oh,
navigation part.
that is
I wrote the
something that I'm
character
meaning to
controller.
play, actually. Yeah, it's a bit
I'm
expensive
meaning to
though.
play it as well. I haven't played the final version.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, it's what was I going to say? Yeah, about the cameras also. Just like there, I've read this. Like you go onto Reddit or something, and there'll be a discussion. And I rarely go on Reddit. I despise Reddit and the general tone there. But anyway, you go onto virtual reality, and they're talking about a certain aspect of VR and how they should solve a problem. And oh no, you can't do this in VR. You can't do that. Oh no, a character your character can't ragdoll in VR. That would make the person puke up or something. No, just move the camera, move the camera away into third person whilst you're ragdolling, and move it back when you're not ragdolling. It's like,
Do that.
what? It's just,
One of the things that I wrote, I'm gonna say it now.
it's brain
One of
dead
the things
though.
that I
Like, it's
wrote
so obvious.
into my game design document that investors see is one of the things I wanted to focus on was a design for allowing cutscenes where the player is not in first person, right?
Yeah,
And properly allowing standard desktop gaming tech to be converted into VR.
yeah,
And I
which we
really want to
need.
be able to do things like that,
I,
you
I
know.
yeah.
And I just mention one other thing that you said in a video about that was, oh shit, I forgot it now. Pardon my language there. Yeesh. But yeah, you mentioned something similar. Oh no, I forgot it now. I had it like 10 seconds ago.
No
I'll
worries.
get back to it. I'll get back to it. Don't worry.
No worries. Yeah, yeah, it's just this stuff is super brain dead to me, and it's such a non issue. And I feel like there's some kind of, I don't know, some kind of brain rot going on collectively from online conversations and these problems where people just seem so locked into such rigid mindsets with the medium and how things should and shouldn't be. And I don't understand where this rigidness has come from. But yeah, that's just me ranting at this point. And there was another thing that I was going to say, but it's also slipped my mind. So you've infected me with that. I remember. And you probably already have considered this, but I want to give you this live final feedback as a player, as a user, as a consumer first. And I think that you've already covered it in your videos anyway, but please pass this on to any prospective investors and devs, is that another thing to really emphasize the joy of VR and show it off is having a proper perspective for it. And I'm talking an actual FOV and an emphasis on seeing the physical movements that we do. So please, so yeah, just
Yeah, I
I
know what
know
you
that you
mean.
already avoid it, but yeah, the common problem of just having a really cropped one eye view that's nauseating to watch and you can't see anything that's going on. I think that inability to properly share VR gameplay with a good perspective for spectators is really harming the medium's ability to advertise itself and show itself off too, and that needs to be remedied. It needs to be fixed. So, but I know that you have a spectator view in TX already. You've used it in your videos, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit more to that as well. So on my quest, not trademark quest, but on my personal quest to doing what I originally wanted to do when I was 4 years old, I did create a sort of attempt at remaking the mechanics of Mario 64, right?
In what
And in
aspect?
doing so, the entire character control system,
Okay.
every bit, including animations. 62 animations took me 30 minutes each to make, and a bunch of transition animations between animations. It's a nice, beautifully complex thing, and it looks. It's another one of those files that was written all at one file, 1,000 lines of code, and it's too much. And I've recreated that ever since. You know, I've revised my platforming systems. But this is desktop stuff, not VR. And for that, I studied. In fact, I have a how it works video on this, a small series of videos where which I call How It Works, where I describe games, and you're gonna love this. I describe how games work, and then because this is the internet, I know that people are gonna say, "Oh yeah, I don't believe you." So what I did is I describe how games work from what I'm seeing, and then I just recreate the exact same shit
Nice.
for the
Nice.
next video. So yeah, here's my version. Uh,
Excellent.
right? But yeah, I did a how it works video on how Mario Odyssey's character camera works, and there's just some beautiful logic to that. So what I did is I built a replication of that in terms of the way its camera works for my game Tubby Supercat. Uh, he's over here. That's Tubby Supercat. Say hello to Tubby Supercat. There he is. And I built a camera system for that, and I used the same one. I copied the code over to make the floating camera for Project TX. So it is a very it's not just a floating spectator cam. It is a very well thought out, designed based on a platforming camera system camera. And again, every little thing has detail behind it,
Beautiful.
including the way a spectator cam should move. You have to think it out.
So, any other devs who are listening, please do a similar thing. Please focus on the spectator thing and make it decent for other people to watch so that your game can shine. Yeah, and follow Nimso's example too, please. We really need more of this as players, as spectators. Yeah, yeah. Well, it really sounds like you are. Nimso, I didn't have too many expectations prior to this conversation, but I am extremely pleasantly taken aback by the detail that you've described, the stuff that you have going on, and I'm going to walk away from this with much more confidence in what's going on than I had before. So that's really
Oh,
great.
I'm really glad.
Yeah,
I knew that there would be I'd be able to trick you into believing me.
you've done good.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I knew it would be helpful for both me and you to have a discussion properly. Because, like we said earlier, text, no,
Sucks.
no, we don't want to do text. Look at that YouTube comment. It looks so ridiculously long. Oh my God, I've been told off for that once in the past.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
actually, it's fine because you've already presented yourself publicly. I know your voice, I know your demeanor, I have a sense of you, so I can actually ascribe who you are to the text that you write. It's if you are anonymous to me, that's when it could be interpreted any which way. So, because you are a public person, it's fine. It's just when you don't know who's behind the text and how worthwhile they are or aren't, that's when trouble arises.
yeah. I guess it's easier, especially when you've got a voice to put to it as well.
Hmm.
You kind of understand the tone of text a little bit more.
Absolutely.
But again, that's the internet. This is not a small society anymore. This is a global society. So
Well, you say that. I mean, it's supposed to be global, but I think overall it still behaves in the same way, or in a tribalistic manner, or in a manner of separating into little countries, and where only certain cultural contexts are accepted or allowed in different areas of the internet. And when you go to Southeast Asia as well, as I mentioned, I lived in China, you come to realize that the internet really isn't a global thing too. The internet very much exists in its own pockets and bubbles, and the Chinese internet and the Southeast Asian internet and the stuff that you would typically see there is worlds apart from what you would typically see in the Western internet. And I think the West, understandably but arrogantly, tends to think that its business is the world's business. It's not the case at all, and that's even true
Yeah,
on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you said there. You know, it's a weird way that humans do this. Humans group up even when they're all in the same room. They just group up.
We're very tribal still. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
another
well,
video
look at one
that talks
giant
about
prison
that.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been watching Prison Break recently, so my mind's going there. But there we go.
All right then.
Dear.
Well then, that's basically everything, and I'm assuming that there's nothing more on your end you want to mention.
No, I can't think of anything right now. I'm sure I will over the course of a week, but that's life.
Well, I won't
You know?
delete you from my Discord friends after we're done. I'll
Mhm.
keep you around, so if you wish to keep on chatting, I will, of course, be here. And yeah, if it can be of any use to you. And it genuinely has been a great pleasure, Nimso. Much more than I would have ever expected, actually. So thank you for taking the time
I'm glad.
and giving such a lovely presentation with all of that, with all of these environments and stuff, too. It's above and beyond.
Yeah, then it's time to finally go back and enter the vehicle. And it's time for us to leave. Here we go. By the way, this one also has a green screen. It's just pink. It's green hill zone, so you can't have a green screen.
But also, just to really be an arsehole and drill it down again, it is time to finally see your project come to fruition in the near future for us to experience. So kick up the arse,
Yeah,
kick up the
very
arse,
near.
kick up the arse.
Very near. I've got plenty of feet to kick. Kick my own ass. Yes.
Excellent. All right then.
No
Thank
problem.
you very much.
Thank you very much.